See that it's 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 2nd Planning Commission meeting. Let the record reflect the chairperson Roberts is absent. Will everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to Council and Administrative Policy Meeting Rules and Procedures, Section 5.2, comments by members of the public are generally limited to 5 minutes or less time if a large number of speakers is anticipated or if approved by the chair. Speakers desiring answers to questions should direct them to the Planning Commission, and if relevant, they may direct them to the appropriate staff member. Speakers can also follow up directly with staff during regular city business hours. Please file a speaker's card with the administrative secretary on the form provided on the counter at the back of the chambers. During this portion of the meeting, those present in council chambers are permitted to speak on items that are listed under items not on the agenda during this portion of the meeting. Public comments for scheduled agenda items should wait until that time. Zoom participation during this general public comment period will not be accepted. Please note that the commission's actions are final unless an appeal is filed with the city clerk within 10 days.
Vice Chair, at this time we have one speaker card, Danny Dorman.
Good evening. You guys are doing a heck of a job. Thank you.
At this time, Vice Chair, we have no other speaker cards.
All right, we'll move on to consent calendar. Commissioner Johnson was absent from the June 4th meeting. If you wish to vote, first make a statement that he has the opportunity to review the video of the meeting to confirm the minutes are correct. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Commissioner Johnson, are you abstaining?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll open a public hearing for a continuance of an application for vested tentative subdivision map, design review, and grant of a density bonus and waivers for Orchard Grove North residential project. Sarah Uwaller will present.
Good evening. My screen's ready to be shared, April. Thank you. Good evening, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. Before you tonight is a continuance of the Planning Commission's review of an initial study, mitigated negative declaration, mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and errata sheet, as well as a vesting tentative subdivision map and design review application for the subdivision of 9.6 acres into 34 parcels, which consists of 30 single-family homes and 4 duets, one on-site bioretention parcel and a 0.4 acre remainder parcel. The project also includes a density bonus application to allow for a 17.2% increase in the density pursuant to the state density bonus law, which I will explain a little bit further in the future. The project was continued from the June 4th Planning Commission meeting due to a discrepancy that was discovered after publication of the agenda. It was found that the MND contained an incorrect cultural resources study, which I will also go into a little bit more in the future. The project site is located on a located at 1901 Lone Oak Road on the east side of Adams Lane and directly north of the previously approved Orchard Grove subdivision and south of the Rock Church and Vineyard Academy. The site is currently developed with one single-family home on the southeast corner of the property, which will remain as the 0.4 acre remainder parcel, and the rest of the parcel is currently vacant at this time. The property is zoned R1E and has a residential very low density general plan designation. The R1E has an allowed density range from 1.1 to 3 units per gross acre. Due to the density bonus request, the project is proposed to have a 3.54 density. As mentioned, the parcel is located within the R1E zoning district as allowed through the state density bonus law. The applicant is requesting waivers of development standards such as the minimum lot size and required setbacks. You can see on the screen where the project does not comply with the standard zoning requirements and is utilizing the state density bonus law. As you probably are all aware by now, there are numerous housing laws that have been passed by the state that limit the local government's ability to deny housing projects and respond to issues about density, development standards, and design standards. The most notable law that's relevant to the project before you tonight is the state density bonus law, commonly referred to as the density bonus application or SDBL. Under this law, an applicant may obtain additional density as well as a relaxation or elimination of development standards known as concessions or waivers in exchange for providing certain levels of affordable housing. The density bonus amount is set on a sliding scale based on the percentage of affordable units provided. In this case, the base density allowed for the project by right is 29 units, which is calculated by using the maximum 3 units per acre multiplied by the 9.6 project acreage. Here, the applicant is proposing to provide 6% of the units to be dedicated to very low income households. The state sliding scale allows for a 22.5% density bonus for projects that offered the 6% very low income, which further calculates out here for this project site to a total of 36 units. However, the applicant is not proposing to seek the full bonus under the law and is instead proposing a 17.2% density bonus for a total of 34 units. As I alluded to earlier, when the qualifying percentage of the units are set aside as affordable units, the city has no discretion with regard to the density bonus award. As mentioned, the applicant may also request incentives and concessions, as well as waivers of standards that would preclude development of the project as designed and at the increased density. In reviewing such concessions and waivers, the city's review is limited to whether the city's standards would, one, not actually result in identifiable and actual cost reductions to provide for affordable housing costs, 2, have a specific adverse impact on public health and safety or property listed on the California Register of Historical Resources for which there is no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate the impact without rendering the project unaffordable. And 3, be contrary to state or federal law. It is important to note that the cities bear the burden of proof for denial for any requested incentive or concession, as well as the waivers not given. An incentive or concession is defined as a reduction in the site development standards or a modification of zoning requirements. Although not utilized for this project, the percentage of affordable units entitles the project to a single concession. Under the state density bonus law, waivers may be requested of development standards. The city is not permitted to apply any development standards that would physically preclude the construction of the project as designed at its permitted density with the concessions. Waivers do not count as incentives or concessions, and therefore, and there are no limits, to the number of waivers that can be requested. The applicant is requesting waivers of development standards which have been determined would physically preclude the construction of the project at the designed and proposed density. A brief recap of these waivers consists of the modifications to interim objective design standards, in addition to standards such as a density transition policy, minimum lot size and dimensions, as well as setbacks. A detailed explanation can be found in the staff report of the requested waivers. The proposed project is also subject to the city's affordable housing ordinance, which requires projects between 27 and 34 units to contain 1 low-income unit 2 moderate income units, and 1 very low income unit. The city's ordinance at the time the project was deemed complete, as well as the definition per the state law, allows a very low income unit to qualify as a low income unit. Therefore, the applicant's proposal of 2 very low income units and 2 moderate units complies with the city's affordable housing ordinance. These 4 units consist of 2 sets of duets and are spread throughout the subdivision. The vesting tentative subdivision map includes 30 single-family lots and 2 sets of duet units, as well as a bioretention lot and a 0.4 acre remainder parcel with the existing home. The project will be accessed off of Adams Lane only through the new street that is being constructed with the Orchard Grove project directly to the south. The interior lots range in size from 8,000 square feet to 9,000 square feet, with slightly larger lots around the perimeter sized from 10,000 to around 13,400 square feet. Full right-of-way improvements will be constructed within the street, including utilities, curb, gutter, separated sidewalk with landscaping strip. There are 6 home plans and 3 distinctive elevation styles for each home. The plan breakdown of these units and elevations is proportionally split. Roughly 46% of the homes, or 16 units, are single-story plans, while the rest are 2-story. The chart on the screen shows the breakdown of the sizes and the homes. As far as design reviews and architecture is concerned, the early California or Spanish style incorporates concrete S-style roofing covering a series of traditional gable roof forms. Stucco is used as a primary wall material and incorporates a deep set of entryway doors. The Mediterranean revival style also incorporates the S-tile roofing, covering a series of pyramid hip roofs and cross hip roof forms. The Craftsman elevation are combinations of stucco and board and batten siding with stone veneer as the base trim. Exterior materials, massing, roof shape, and pitches, as well as color and materials, create a strong neighborhood identity and architectural variation throughout the streetscape of the subdivision. The city prepared a mitigated negative declaration for the project in accordance with the CEQA requirements. Several potentially significant impacts were identified. However, mitigation measures and mitigation monitoring and reporting program are incorporated to reduce those impacts to less than significant levels. As mentioned earlier, the project was previously continued due to a discrepancy that was found after the packet was published, where the incorrect archaeological assessment report or cultural resources study was included as an attachment to the MND. The CEQA consultant subsequently provided an errata sheet addressing this discrepancy and noting that it did not change any of the significance determinations. Given the report and the staff report that you've read this evening, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the following resolutions as conditioned, recommending that the City Council adopt resolution number 24-028 for the mitigated negative declaration, resolution 24-029 for the vesting tentative subdivision map 9649, and resolution 24-030 for the design review number 23-012. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions, as is the applicant, and we have our CEQA consultant available on Zoom if needed. Thank you.
Does the Planning Commission have any clarifying questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Flohr?
Yes. Hi, sir. I'm just wondering, there doesn't seem to be any mention of a park in this project. Is there not a requirement for a park here?
You're correct. There is no park requirement for this size of a development.
I noticed also that this development is like a second phase or a second part of a larger development, but it's been split in two. If it was the one larger development, would there be a requirement for a park?
So I have discussed that with our Parks Department to see if that would be a requirement. And again, they have indicated that a park would not be required due to the proximity of the parks across the street, and then the size of the project as well. So I also have our Parks Department here for further information if needed, but they have indicated a park would not be required for the total number of units.
All right, and when would I ask the park department for that? Is it that during clarifying, or is that going to be during discussion? Okay, we'll save that for discussion. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Brand?
Yeah, thank you for this, by the way, Sarah. In comparing to the original drawings that we saw, I'm seeing along Lone Oak Road, there's a I'm guessing, don't quote me on this, but probably that 6-foot concrete wall adjacent to the 4-foot, if I remember correctly, concrete fence. Do those run very closely as if compared to the wall adjacent to Adams Lane? Am I looking at that correctly?
Can you clarify one more time where you're talking? I'm sorry about that.
Against the bioretention area on Lone Oak, I'm seeing a wall adjacent to the concrete fence.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay,
Is
on
that
elevation.
Is that in close proximity, or is that up against the homes there? Because there's that strip on the bioretention basin there. I can't tell. I'm just guessing that it looks like it's adjacent to the fence. So closer to Lone Oak than the houses, excuse me.
So let me see if I can answer this. The split rail fence should be around the bioretention, and then the wall is the property line of the homes. Does that clarify?
Yeah, I just didn't see that in the original, unless that, okay.
In the original, you mean in the design review or tentative map?
Yeah, in the map.
Okay, I can pull that up and take a look as well. Give me just a second.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Are there any other clarifying questions?
So I have a question, and this is going to be about the trees that are planted. So a lot of neighborhoods around in Brentwood, the trees that are planted when the development initially goes in, the tree is young, but as time goes on, the rooting system of those trees tend to lift up the concrete, causing safety hazards. Do we know what type of, I see the listed tree palette here, but I don't know enough to know what will happen 10 years from now. Is that root system the type of roots that will cause the concrete to lift up?
Sure. So this is the preliminary conceptual landscape plan. We do get final landscape plans through the improvement plan process, and that's reviewed by our engineering division as well as our Parks and Rec division. We do have Parks here who might be able to answer that question for you, but I know she does look at that as far as what type of species is actually proposed in the final process so that we can ensure that those issues do not occur. There may be tree species here that are shown that might need to change in the future because we do find that issue when we get further into the final review, but we might be able to ask Janice tonight if she knows ahead of time if those trees will cause issues, but she does take a look at that during the final review process.
Excuse me. Things about traffic, those type of questions, that would be later on. Okay, thank you.
Sarah, I have two. Commissioners, any other clarifying questions before I go? I just have two. One is simple and one's going to be for Eric. One is on your presentation, you said I just want clarification on very low income counts as low income. Is that correct, Verena, in the state?
So low counts as very low.
Low, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then Mr. Nolthenius, there's an agenda item the future agenda item that was passed that affects this area that is supposedly going to come to city council at some point, I think later this month. Can you confirm the item in the schedule?
Yeah, through the chair and for the commission's benefit, I'm actually working on a series of reports right now that'll go to the council on the 23rd, so in 3 weeks from today. One of those is a request that you had made previously regarding traffic and safety concerns in the vicinity of this project site. And there's a couple of others as well. They'll be done as individual reports asking for direction from council.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Through the chair, if I may clarify, I think I said that wrong. I think you were correct. So very low counts as low. Sorry, it's
Okay.
confusing, but yes, very low does count as low. I think that's
Okay.
how it was written in the staff report and the presentation, but I think I just spoke wrong, so.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
one other thing to clarify, the question regarding separation between the landscape wall and the split rail, two rail concrete fence. It looks like that's about like over 90 feet apart from each other. You can see in the section, it's on sheet 2 of the tentative subdivision map, which looks to be page 788 of the packet. There's a section D-D, which is the section detail showing where the landscape wall is, a 6-foot wall with the slope and the bioretention, and then up to the slope of the concrete split rail fence.
Seems terribly deceiving based on this photo, though, or this, because this, at least from a range perspective, it's, I don't know, we can get into that later, but thank you.
Yeah, that,
I think there's going to be questions about fence lines for later. All right, any more clarifying questions before we open for public comment? Okay. At this time, the public is permitted to address the Planning Commission. Remarks are limited to 5 minutes per person, except for the applicant, who will have 10 minutes. Does the applicant wish to address the commission?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name's David Best. I'm with Shea Homes. I appreciate you hearing our project tonight. I don't have a lot to add from Sarah's report. She did a great job describing things. I'll try to clarify a couple of the questions that you'd answered, and then I'm sure we can discuss it more. The fencing around the detention basin, the concept there is that the wall would separate private homes, rear yards from the basin, so that in that particular situation, there's a wall. But when it's open to Lone Oak Road, it would be a fence, so that you don't circle the entire basin with a wall. So that's the intent, is that the wall is there to separate private homes from the basin, and then in public areas it's just a fence. And then yeah, Sarah was correct that the very low qualifies as low in the state's affordability matrix. So I'm open for any questions here if you have any to ask, and I appreciate you hearing us.
Do we want to ask the applicant questions, or do we want to hear from the public before we ask the applicant any questions? He didn't use much of his time.
Dang it. I would like to hear from the public first.
Yeah, same, thank you.
Okay. April, can we open public comment?
At this time, I have one speaker card in person, and those on Zoom, please raise your hands if you'd like to speak. Our first speaker is Danny Dorman.
Good evening. Let me first start off by saying the reason I'm wearing this mask is so that you guys really can't see how my face looks right now. Shea. See, the thing is, I really don't care about density bonus. As a matter of fact, on the next agenda item, I'm going to applaud it. But there are so many things that are wrong with this, and I'm talking about from a person who lives here point of view. I don't live near any of this, first off, so whatever's done here doesn't affect me personally. When I say lives here, I mean a resident of Brentwood. The park is a very new thing. That one caught me off guard. I don't know how that was avoided. That Park and Rec found a way to not have a park is amazing. I mean, this thing is huge. This is bigger than the other Shea thing that was just approved. And there's no park? Help me understand that. Was it because of the way it's parsed and the way it's worded so that, oh, it's not really one big project, it's really two small ones, and because it's two small ones and we only have so many homes on these properties, we don't have to have a park. They didn't even talk about in lieu fees. I mean, they're just straight up, no, we don't have to put a park at all. Please help me understand that. And then, of course, Commissioner Sparling asked them about a fence. Okay, thank you. For those who don't know, Kindred and Balfour, $30,000 a doggone fence, and by rule, I can't look back there at those guys. So yes, ask if they're actually gonna put a fence up. This thing has been round and round here since 2018. It was postponed in 2020. It was postponed in 2022. And now it's like, oh my God, we had better things going on. We had better things for the city when this thing was put out here in 2022. I honestly don't know how staff, and I'm including Park and Rec, especially Park and Rec, how they can get away with saying we don't need a park. And oh, not only do we not need a park, we're going to stuff more homes in here. And one of the big drivers in 2022 was driving, the congestion on these streets. And now you have even more homes and no friggin' park. Come on. I really hope staff has an answer for you regarding that because, as I said, this place is bigger than the last one that was approved. Now, you are the Planning Commission. You can turn this garbage down, and then Shay can go and talk to the council. You're under no obligation to take this stuff. None. Look at what it is we are trying to do for Brentwood. Then look at this garbage and say, is this really what we want? Is this what we want to hang our hats on as members of the commission? You guys are the closest forward-facing to us, the regular folks. So please think about that, and especially the fence. Think about that. Thank you.
At this time, I have no other speaker cards in person. We'll go to Zoom. Our first speaker is Cinziana Tador.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate showing the timer for me. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this item. I am addressing to the Planning Commission in the name of my neighborhood. We've been around and around and around with the south side of this development. And I just want to say, I can't help it to say it's disgusting to see Mr. Best in the chambers, who is never the best. He proved it over and over again during private discussions as well as public discussions. He's trying to fast track this in such way that the city has no saying in it. So it's a good time for you to show courage and deep analytical thinking in a sense that you're putting residents first and our city first. I would like to start by asking to discuss putting the wall against Lone Oak to match the south side. The plans are not very clear on that one, and I think it was mentioned already in a couple of the questions that were addressed to the planner. Also, the split rail fence, I didn't see it, so I want to make sure it's included in the plan. When it comes to parks, we know very well that Parks and Recs do not, and it's public record. You can go back and listen to planning commission meetings as well as city council meetings. Park and Recs do not want to maintain and take over smaller parks. But this particular development does need a park, even though it is across the street from Blue Goose Park. Blue Goose Park is overwhelmed today. If you go there every Monday, you will see the overflowing trash cans and trash throughout the park because it's overcapacity. People don't even have enough receptacles to use for their trash. Also, I want to thank you, Mr. Sparling, for bringing the traffic study up. I don't understand why it's been delayed for our area. Your ask was very specific. It's been only 5 months to be brought to the city council. I do think it is ridiculous, and my neighbors were appalled on how this is slow walked and your ask is being ignored. 5 months. It's gonna be close to 6 months by the time city council's gonna hear it and only decide, oh, do we wanna actually look at this or not? So possibly we'll see a November date when this item will come on a city council agenda per se. So I think it's insulting to you, to this planning commission, that this item has been delayed for so long. And let me go back to the traffic study overall. Silvergate Apartments has been built on O'Hara. Emblem Brentwood, 415 units, is coming on O'Hara. This area is overwhelmed. The traffic study really needs to include all of these components when it comes to this a particular development. How is VMT calculated? Just remember this when you make your decision tonight. Let the courts decide. Let Shia Homes take us to court. Remember the Bridal Gate case. The court ruled that we need a park there, and also there's still a pending traffic study that stops that particular development for being discussed. So please show courage, please show support for the residents and for our city by rejecting this project. And again, let the court decide. And also, one thing, why are the affordable units all the way in the back of this development?
The speaker's time has expired. At this time, I have no other hands raised.
So I think what I'd like to do, would we like to ask for questions of the applicant before we close public comment? Yeah? Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? I'd asked and you guys had suggested that we hear from the public before we ask questions of the applicant. Do we have questions for the applicant? I'll go ahead and start. Mr. Best, thanks for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
Did you hold any community meetings for this development like you did for Orchard Grove?
We did not hold any community meetings. The neighbors adjacent to this particular, directly adjacent to this particular development, we know very well because we're building the one next door. And Mrs. McCoy, who owns the property, is the most adjacent neighbor, and she is working with us on the development. But no, we did not hold any formal public meetings.
Okay, and so you just stated that the McCoys still own the property?
That's correct.
Okay. When did you, I don't know if this is appropriate to ask, so I'll ask legal to make sure I'm staying within realms. When did you start negotiating with the McCoys to build this project? Roughly.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's relevant, but I'd be happy to tell you it's been about a year.
Well, the reason why I ask is because of the cumulative impact of this development, what would be essentially one larger development versus being split into two. That's why I ask.
Right. So I think to get at the point of your question, what I think the point of your question is, we had been talking to Mrs. McCoy several years ago, and she wasn't interested in engaging with us at that time. And it was only about a year ago where she decided she wanted to. So we did not know that we could possibly be expanding our project to the north until that time.
Okay. For the vesting tentative map, for where the single stories go versus the two-story homes, you had made in the May, I think it was May 3rd, in the Planning Commission meeting, you had mentioned that you made concessions to the folks on Gracie Lane and Lone Oak that you would put single stories along the fence line.
That's correct. And that was one of the requests of the neighborhood when we were going through that project.
So are lots 31, so I see lot 31 is a single story, lot 32 is a two-story, and then obviously lots 33 and 34 are the duets, right? So they're two stories. And I know that they're further away, right? Because one is from the bioretention, has the bioretention right behind it, and then the McCoy residence is behind 33 and 34. So 31, is 31 going to remain a single story?
We don't have any plans to change the development plan as it is before you, if that's your question.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all the questions I have for you now. We'll probably end up having further discussions.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I will look to close public comment. Or public
So moved.
hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Discussion. Why don't we start with
So
Commissioner Johnson?
I have a concern. So I went down by the visit the property yesterday, and as blind as I am right now, I noticed, I'm concerned about the traffic coming out of this development onto Adams. And I read it, I guess it was 300 and I want to say it was 62 units of, cars coming there a day. That doesn't, that's just for this. I used that right number, hold on. I think it's 300 increased traffic units a day, I believe is how they call it, 360 some odd, just for this unit. And that's probably spread out, it probably weighted to drive times. So if you have this and everybody dumps onto Adams, and then you have the other piece of property slightly below it, which probably is another, if you do the same math, probably like 800 total of cars coming out of there during the day, weighted to rush hour times. That's going to be challenging. People are going to be going to school on Adams. People are going to be going to work on Adams or using that road. I think that's going to be a problem. The other thing I'm concerned about is, we were talking about parks and not having a park inside. there's a park across the street, as everybody knows. So if you lived in this development, would your kids be crossing over that street to go to that park? And there's no light or anything there to stop traffic from with these cars, going up and down that road, and the increased traffic going up and down that road. Additionally, I think you can make a left turn out of there, which I also think is problematic. So I got a concern about the traffic flow going out, especially at rush hour times. The lack of, for safety reasons, anybody who buys a house who has children crossing the street to go to that park with this increased traffic flow, I think it could be dangerous.
Do you want to hear from our traffic engineer who is here?
I would.
Mr. Kurzban?
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. So, a couple things. The subdivision that has already been improved and that is currently under construction has been given a mitigation measure to widen Adams to provide a protected left turn pocket. So vehicles turning into the subdivision will be protected from cars approaching from the rear. The second thing they've been conditioned to do is to place a crosswalk at this same location with rectangular flashing beacons, which are pedestrian-activated yellow flashing lights. What the second phase of this project brings is a completion of the sidewalk to the north. So in the future, if someone needs to go to the school, they can walk all the way to Grant Street, cross at the signal, which also has a crossing guard to get to the school. If they wish to go to the park, they can walk up Adams to O'Hara and cross at that traffic signal. So pedestrians can safely get across the street on either end. The only reason for the mitigation measure for the crosswalk in the mid-block location was we didn't know the sidewalk was coming to the north, and we couldn't have Shea Homes build it because they didn't own the property. So when this second phase comes in, you're gonna have a continuous sidewalk along the entire length. The left turn out, the good news is that Adams is straight as an arrow. You can see to safely determine when can I safely get out. There will be times of congestion, mainly school related. One thing to remember with the school is with the opening of the new school on Smith, this population at Marsh Creek will decrease. Everybody who lives in that subdivision north of Grant goes to the new school. So you're actually gonna have less cars here in the future. The other part about the left turn out and the reason why you have a protected left turn pocket on Adams is you have vehicles approaching. When you're on the side street, you're safe. Your only decision is when can I go? Outside of 7:30 to 8:30 and 2:30 to 3:30, the rest of the day, that should not be an issue. And it's safe because the driver can determine when can I safely proceed. If ultimately what we were looking at is can he build a traffic signal, I can almost guarantee you that when you do that analysis, the answer is going to be no. That's based on volumes and you're just not going to meet the criteria. So I am confident that this will work safely given the bigger scenario of what's happening in the area.
So isn't this street kind of like on an angle?
The side street?
Adams, isn't Adams kind of, it's not at a 90-degree angle to, what's the name of this street? Tresses Circle? Would it be like at a 90-degree angle or is it a different angle than?
It's a little less than 90, but the sight distance up and down Adams is unrestricted. So Adams is a 25-mile-per-hour street. Stopping sight distance and when we do this calculation, we do it for 35 miles per hour. You have more than adequate stopping sight distance. The idea being that if a driver grows impatient coming out of the subdivision, anybody approaching can come to a complete stop. So it ultimately, sight distance is usually your biggest concern. That's not an issue in this particular location.
Okay.
While we have Mr. Kurzvan up there, I have some questions, but I'll let you guys, who wants to go first?
Just a
Mr.
quick
Floor?
question. Adams Lane, as you mentioned, is very straight there. Can you tell me what the speed limit is on Adams Lane?
25.
It's a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Yes.
Can you tell me what the average rate of traffic is on that? Because I think people are probably going faster than 25 because it's a straight line.
I can, but I'd have to go up to my desk to get the number.
Okay.
I don't have it in front of me.
But you would agree that with a very straight street, you'll have people that were exceeding the speed limit just because it feels comfortable to do so.
You can't go any lower than 25. So, I mean, and you have a school zone, which is further, but 25 is, you're talking about a 2-lane roadway. And like I said, I can't legally make it 20. I mean,
No,
I can, but it's not going to meet the criteria to be based on the vehicle code. So 25 is your minimum speed limit. And I feel, yeah, that's safe. One thing to remember, and this is more of when school is getting in and out, congestion is safe. Congestion is 5 miles an hour. You don't have safety issues in congested school zones. You have frustrated drivers who end up doing crazy things, which is why I have a job in the first place. But ultimately, you can get in and out of this area safely. I mean, I've been out there many, many times. Once school is either in session or done, there's not that much going on Adams. You have much better areas for access, O'Hara being one of them and Lone Tree being the other. So it's been looked at, and given the mitigation measures we placed on the original project, I think we've provided the traveling public with safe access. We've addressed the pedestrian issue temporarily, and I think phase 2 improves on that because now we don't really need that middle of the block crosswalk because you can cross at a signalized intersection at either end, which is where everything is anyway. There's no reason to cross in the middle of the street. There's nothing on that side of the street. It's just a fence for the school. So I think they have provided us, they've listened to us on what we needed, and we got it.
So a couple things about that. One, a child, an unaccompanied child coming from the north project, trying to get down to Blue Goose Park, is going to have to cross Adams. So you're saying they can come down to where to cross Adams? Where's that crosswalk?
The sidewalk? You will, when phase 2 is completed, you will have continuous sidewalk on the east side of Adams from O'Hara to Grant. It will tie into the sidewalk that currently exists in front of the Rock Church. You already have sidewalk all the way up to the other end.
And okay, I was thinking that Blue Goose was across Adams Lane, or where is it exactly in relation to this?
As far as
Yeah, it's across Adams Lane. It's
what is the park?
the park.
Right, but you can cross at O'Hara at a traffic signal.
Okay, I happened to have driven past Blue Goose Park on a Saturday when I went, or maybe it was a Sunday when I went to look at this a few weeks ago when this was originally scheduled to come before us. And the park was extremely busy. There were cars parked all up and down the side of the road, which really doesn't give you a lot of visibility when you're crossing the road. And I did have an incident where a younger person actually walked from the park. I was traveling, they were coming from, the park was on my left, and they walked to their car right in front of my car. I mean, it wasn't a safe thing that I saw. And the park was not only busy, but there were 4 or 5, maybe 6 vendor shelters set up. I mean, it was a lot going on there at that park, and it just didn't feel that safe. The other question I have for you is when you're going to the park, you're not doing it during school hours. You're doing it when people are coming up and down, like maybe it's on a Saturday, and people are coming and going from the park. And again, Adams Lane, the straight as an arrow, looks kind of like a racetrack. I mean, people, and I mean, I know you're a traffic engineer, and I've looked into these things. I have an interest, you know, in things like, you know, road diets and calming and things. It just is a straight line, and people are gonna be going more than 25 miles an hour on that road. I can guarantee you if there's not traffic in front of them. And I just wanted to make that point that didn't look real safe to me when I drove past it. I almost had an incident where a pedestrian, a young pedestrian, crossed right in front of my car. And, you know, my wife and I were pretty taken aback by that, but they just weren't looking at us because it's Saturday and they're just, you know, crossing the street. They weren't using a crosswalk. So I just have some concerns. I appreciate your presentation, and I just am, you know, safety is a term. Safe is a spectrum, right? There's more safe, there's less safe. It's a measure of risk, and you say if there's very little risk, it's safer. If there's more risk, it's less safe. And I just see. I just don't see this as safe as maybe you do. And I sure am cognizant of the fact that when we were talking about some other issues in this general area, the residents, and you and I spoke at that meeting, the residents, we had promised them a meeting that they could meet with you and talk about ways to improve the safety in the area. And as we learned tonight, that hasn't happened yet. So it's hard for me to really know what is going to be the situation on the ground when you haven't even had the meeting or worked with the neighborhood at all yet to establish a plan for that whole loop between Adams and Grant and Lone Oak and I forget the other little one that goes back across and then back over to O'Hara. So it's just really hard for me to understand what exactly is going to be going on there because that meeting hasn't happened. And as I heard a caller tonight, they're very frustrated waiting for that. So other than that, thank you very much.
No, but let's look what's in place. The park side of Adams is red curb. You cannot park there. If someone decided, if what you saw was people parked illegally, then we call the police department. If a person decides to run across the middle of the street, in the middle of the block, I'm out. Unless I build a fence, I can't stop that. So I agree with you that it's unsafe. That's not unsafe because of engineering. That's unsafe because a human decided to run across the street. I can't fix that. But as you can see, that's why it's red. So you can see to get in and out.
That's the opposite side of the street. What's
That's
on the other
the side of the park.
Right, but
You
the
can
side
legally
opposite the
park on the other side.
And that's where the person had to walk across that
Right.
street to
So
get to
they
their car
jaywalked
on the
and
other
broke the
side,
law.
and they walked right across.
Understand?
Yeah, well, jaywalking
It
has
is
been kind of
jaywalking. It's
legalized in California.
It's walking across the middle of the intersection between two controlled intersections. So
Right, but
it's
jaywalking is
technically
legal in
jaywalking.
California.
Can I just ask for one person talking at a time? That would
Sure.
be
You
would
want
be
the
helpful.
definition of jaywalking next time I come?
No, I want to be able to hear both of you speak.
Okay.
So I think Commissioner Brand might have some questions. Also, Commissioner, I believe we have the CEQA consultant on the line. If you have questions about, there was a question from Ms. Tudor about how VMT was calculated. And so if you have questions around VMT, there's a consultant available as well. I forgot to put that out.
I don't have a question about VMT. I'll just make the final observation is whether or not engineering can do anything about it doesn't affect whether or not it's safe. I'm just talking about lives. Okay, I care about the people that live in this neighborhood, and I just want their children to be safe. Thanks.
So do I.
Commissioner Brand, do you have questions for Mr. Gerspan?
Just a couple. You described I think in phase 2 it was, a lighted, not a signal, but a crosswalk that's got the indicators on either
Flashing
side.
yellow, it's called a rectangular flashing beacon. There's one up the street on O'Hara at Pimento,
Yes,
similar. We've
that's
got
correct.
20 of them. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's what's going in.
Okay, and I assume, I'm just looking at it here, it looks like it's right at where Trellis Circle spits out onto Adams, or is it somewhere else?
It's at the intersection where the left turn pocket is. I'd have to get the original plans, but it is conditioned to be placed, and it's a yellow crosswalk to indicate school zone, and it will have the flashing beacons attached to it.
Because there's a bunch of those that cross O'Hara as well that I'm aware of.
We have it at Pimento and O'Hara because there's a park on the west side, so when
O'Hara,
those,
right.
I'm sorry.
No, of O'Hara, the park is on the west side of O'Hara, right? To
Right,
get,
and if
yeah.
people from Pimento want to cross, so we placed it there as well. So
Okay.
we typically will add them as requested. We've got them on Garin Parkway. Mainly, we have them at schools, parks, and trail crossings. Heavily used crosswalks where it helps to heighten the awareness for the driver that someone's trying to cross the street.
Yes, and I understand completely why at, let's assume, I think it's at Charles Circle, maybe somebody has the info on that, but that makes perfect sense because as I know you've stated many times, it's like a, path of least resistance for a lot of traffic, including pedestrian traffic. And I think, those seeking access to both Marsh Creek Elementary as well as Blue Goose Park, you're going to cross the street immediately and go left or right. And I think that's understandable, whether they decide to cross at Grant, in which we have a wonderful crossing guard up there, or down at O'Hara to get to Blue Goose. So if I'm understanding this also, that sidewalk will go all the way from Trellis Circle all the way to Grant, passing the Rock Church, and then connecting. Okay, I wanted to cross that off as well. Then a question about north and south. I mean, because Adams basically goes north-south-ish. Based on my own observation, I would imagine that the majority of traffic is coming south on Adams, because really the only reason you'd go north is to go to Lone Tree or Grant, I guess, if you will.
Or the school.
Or the school, but if you live here, you likely walk. And these people are zoned for Marsh Creek, not Montanez. So I guess do you find that, because based on what you described as far as that protected left, that means that there's a central lane with the black and yellow
Correct.
in the
It's
center?
3 lanes wide, 1 lane in each direction with a middle left turn only lane, so that the vehicle waiting to turn left into the subdivision is not blocking the southbound through lane.
Understood. So that would enable you to have a little bit of runway if you were making a left onto Adams and go south.
You could use that as refuge, yes.
Refuge, that's a great word. Okay, so that clears this up. And then moving east to Lone Oak Road, I realize that there is no connection from this subdivision to it. However, as part of the conditions of approval, there was a mention of a right-of-way onto Grant from Lone Oak. I don't know, you're looking at me with a bit of confusion.
A second driveway for Vineyards Academy?
I don't know what the specific purpose was, but I did observe.
Through the chair, are you referring to the right-of-way dedication on
Yes.
the backside?
Yes.
So engineering may be able to speak a little bit more to that, but it's not actual it wouldn't be a driveway or a street or anything. It's a dedication for right-of-way on the other side for potentially curb gutter, sidewalk, things like that, those types of improvements on Lone Oak.
Right, because the other condition of approval talks about the gutters and the curbs and the general street improvements. So that would be kind of in sync. The right-of-way would be in
You do curb, gutter, and sidewalk along your frontage. There is no vehicular access onto Lone Oak.
Correct. I'm curious because it wasn't super clear to me as far as what those improvements were going to look like. I didn't really see many details, so I'm just curious, that's all.
I think if you go out there, they've started? Yeah.
They did. There's
On Gracie, yeah, but
I think there is some additional pavement along with the ditch and a wall right next to it. And they are dedicating land for the future widening of Lone Oak.
right, okay.
But I think your main point, I think, was that there's not going to be any access from Orchard Grove or Orchard Grove North directly to Lone Oak or Gracie Lane.
Correct.
That's right. And I was just more curious as far as the details behind the improvements to that street, only because it is adjacent. However, yeah, as you described, there is no access.
Right.
But there is an improvement taking place there.
So those details would come during the improvement plan process with the engineering department after planning's approval. So let's say this planning was granting approval, and this has to go to city council as well, so they would have to grant approval. But then through the process of pulling their permits, part of it is the improvement plans, which engineering reviews, and that's when they look at those details that are required per the conditions of approval.
Yeah, that understood. That's very helpful in clarification. I did want to follow up on a point Commissioner Floor had commented as far as the that long red curb that exists on the west side of Adams. That's a very common pickup drop-off point for parents of Marsh Creek Elementary. They, put on the hazards, you park there. Some park down at Blue Goose and they wait for their kid to walk all the way down the street. So I think it's safe to say that we're going to see some degree of idle traffic maybe that hangs out around there. I don't know, because that's not the intended purpose of those types of lanes, and it is a bike lane, that I'm not sure how we can consider for that, unfortunately. I know that how impactful that could be. And it is a narrow window, right? 25 minutes maybe in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. I do know that, thankfully, that right-only lane that looks like it's widened out of Trellis going northbound on Adams, I imagine there'll be signs there indicating no stopping zone, that kind of thing.
Red curb literally means no stopping or parking.
Okay,
And what you're describing happens at every school in this city.
fair.
There is no way I'm going to go out there and try and fix that. You're going to have to talk to somebody else because there is just nowhere to put these cars. And I get what you're saying. I'm not happy about it either. We at one point in time actually had teachers putting cones out there. And then they wanted me to put delineators out there. I said, well, it acts as a bike lane for every other hour of the day, and so I need to keep it clear. But you're absolutely right. The red curb does get, and I wouldn't say they're parking in it. They're in their vehicle waiting for their child.
Standing,
They've also started going into the bus pullout area. And it's frustrating, but the way these schools are built, there's just literally not enough room. And it happens more in the afternoon because people tend to get there early and need to wait rather than pull up, drop off, and go. My daughter went to Adams and Heritage, so I know all about screwed up traffic. And so I get what you're saying, and if I had a fix, I would have done it.
Okay, I just think it's important to discuss because that's the sort of reality of this street is, in practice it's perfect, but in reality, right, we've got additional challenges.
Traffic's never perfect.
I can't imagine it is.
Nope.
Can we move on to VMT? Is that possible?
Yeah, so
Sorry, you go.
So, Mr. Kurzvan, I don't have questions for you now, but it may come up during the VMT that you're the better person to answer than the consultant. But so stay close. Don't go yet.
I'm old school. I'm not a VMT guy, really. But I mean, I have the report in front of me.
Yeah. So
And they've done the analysis, and I didn't crunch the numbers, but I looked at the results, and it meets the criteria that it needs to meet. So.
Yeah, we have the
Is your consultant noted the VMT?
we had the CEQA consultant on
Zoom.
on Zoom as well. That's why I was saying just stay close. We may have you back.
That's your guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Do you have questions for the consultant at this time then?
Yeah, I think we'll
Okay.
start off with, there was a question from Ms. Todor about how VMT is decided. And Mr. Dorman, we'll get to your question about the fences. That'll be part of our discussion as well. It's on my agenda to make sure we get answered.
Sure.
But-
So we have Josh Smith on the line. Do you see him, April? Oh, never mind. Sorry.
I see.
Thank you.
Is that Josh?
That would be.
Josh, can you just go through how VMT is calculated and why we use VMT, why VMT is used instead of LOS? And also what's interesting about this project, and one of the reasons why I asked Mr. Best about when they have possession of the property is because we had a 51 home development approved in, I'm not sure when the date of the city council, but it was moved along from the planning commission in May of 2022. And then now we have a 34 home, so it's 85 homes. Can you go through the VMT definition and why its use of LOS? And would, if it was an 85 home development versus a 34 plus 51, two separate developments, would that change the calculations?
Sure, those are all good questions. Good evening. So the methodology, it follows the county, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority methodology. So we're following the gold standard approach here. At least that's what the traffic consultants did. It's a VMT analysis methodology. To answer your first question, why we don't do LOS, things have changed, and that was a decision made by the Office of Planning and Research several years ago. Nothing we can do about it, so we follow what they say in that regard with regard to CEQA. And so we moved on to that VMT approach.
And VMT stands for what?
VMT, vehicle miles traveled. Okay, so they're following the methodology, and so what we're looking at here is it's a regional approach. So if I just take a step back, I know it's a bit confusing. I can totally understand that. So we're not looking at it on the very micro local level, right? So we're looking at it. What happens is the county breaks up the city into all these traffic areas, these impact zones, TAZs. And so that's the regional aspect to it. And so all that needs to happen for this to be a less than significant impact, which is what occurred in this case, is for the per capita VMT, right, of the zone, not this project, of the zone, to be relatively low. It needs to be 15, the zone itself needs to be 15% below, and then so it's really all about project location, if that helps. And so unfortunately, so you brought up if the project were bigger, it would still pass this threshold. If that makes sense.
How many homes have to be built in order for a specific traffic study to be done?
There's a screening level. I believe it's something like 30 or so. I'd have to look.
It's 100, isn't it? Thank you, Mr. Kurzban. And so this would still, no, that's fine. That's why I asked Mr. Kurzban not to go anywhere. We discussed this at length in the 2022 meeting. Because one of the concerns I had, and I voiced it then, and I've been on the commission for 4 years, and this could either be for Mr. Kurzban or yourself, Mr. Smith. I've never seen a VMT study not be 15% Brentwood average. So if every project that's coming forward to me is 15% below average for Brentwood, how is that possible with more people in Brentwood than there were 4 years ago, 10 years ago? It doesn't, this is where I struggle with it, and I think the residents struggle with it because it's not common sense. Because if vehicle miles traveled, right, if you have more people taking more trips, right, because today this development, neither Orchard Grove or Orchard Grove North exists today, right? So if you drop in 85 homes and there is more than one car in each home, there's a reason why developers build 2 and 3 car garages in California. There's going to be more vehicle miles traveled. So how can every development and every CEQA document that I've seen in 4 years say it's 15% below Brentwood average?
I can't speak to all the documents over the past 4 years. I understand your concern, though.
But I think most of them have been done by your organization.
Well, these are done by traffic consultants that do this for a living. This is their job, and they use the CCTA model. It's the county's model. I mean, we can't use a different model. We're not in a different county. So I don't know.
Right, but you and Mr. Kurzban, you may want to come up. How is everything below 15% average? What is the average? Mr. Kurzban, do you want to come to the mic because I see you looking at something? Well, please come to the mic.
That's a better question. So one quick thing, VMT is per capita, not total vehicle miles traveled, it's per person. So here's what happened. Some guy smarter than me one day decided that you don't need LOS, you need VMT for CEQA analysis only.
Correct.
I sat at the Contra Costa Transportation Authority when they started talking about this, and I, as a traffic engineer for the city of Brentwood, said, that's great, but don't take LOS away from me, because otherwise I will never get another intersection analyzed. I'll never get another traffic signal in this town. So the 100 peak hour trips, which is about 90 to 95 homes, would require a traffic study, which is not CEQA related. So when CCTA was putting this together, they were smart enough to divide the county with the understanding that East County, Pittsburgh, Antioch, Oakley, and us are a bit different than Concord, Walnut Creek, and that, because that's where we're going. So we get a little bit of a break. The average, I believe, is the Brentwood average is 29.6. The east sub-area is 24.9, and I believe this came in at 21 point something, so they are under that average.
Excuse
Do me one favor, don't ask me where those averages came from. He may know, but that's the basis of what's happened. It's per capita.
Hold your question for 1 second. So my concern about this project, and this isn't even a Shea, it's related to the Shea project, obviously, right? But it's the way we calculate this, which is we have a Marsh Creek attendance of 720 kids. I know it may be changing, and these are rough estimates pulling from their websites. We have Vineyard Academy expanding to 260 kids. And now we're dropping in 85 homes, right? Which are going to have 2 to 3 cars, not 1 car, because you and I had a long discussion in 2022 about whether 1 car or 2 cars are go to these homes.
That's in the peak hour.
No, that exist in the homes, right?
Right.
So,
yeah. 10 trips per home.
Right. I'm not going to relitigate that conversation, but that is 1,100 cars that are going to be in this area in a short period of time, potentially, right? And yet we're being told that it's less than the impact for both the traffic as well as CEQA are less than significant. Now, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, that there's going to be less than significant impact with that many cars in a small space for maybe a few hours of the day. But as Commissioner Floor was concerned about is the safety. It only takes 1 accident to have something tragic happen. And so that's the concern I think that this commission has around less than significant and the traffic that's going to be dropped in this neighborhood where there is no traffic today outside of the school traffic because there's no homes. We haven't even gotten to the impact to the residents on Gracie Lane and Lone Oak, which will be addressed at the council meeting later this month. That's, I think, our concern that we're trying to understand, because we're going to be responsible to some degree by if we were to approve this project and there was an accident as our, as the design is as well. I think that's the concern around this topic. So I know that Commissioner Johnson had a question, so I'll let him ask his.
I just wanted to fully understand. You said Brentwood was 29.6. Is that what you said? Or correct me what you said, 29.6. You
For VMT?
Is that what?
I don't know that they have, so I'm reading this. I didn't write this, I'm reading it. The city of Brentwood averages 29.16 vehicle miles traveled. The east sub-area average is 24.9. And I believe this project came in at 21 or 24. So how they come up with these numbers, this is a CCTA model that makes no sense to me. And I agree with you.
That's not comforting.
No, because VMT doesn't do anything for me. LOS does stuff.
Right.
VMT doesn't look at safety.
Yeah.
It just looks how many miles you're driving.
Right.
Okay.
So just one more question on during the peak hours, what do you estimate? You said you lived in Shadow Lakes, and what do you estimate the congestion is going to be during the peak hours? In the morning, what do you think it's going to be? Like, how long do you think you're going to have to wait to get out of that development?
In the summer, nothing. It's great. Peak hour is literally defined as the 60-minute period in which you see the most vehicles. With school in session, that's going to be 7:30 to 8:30. For reasons of calculations, the basic premise is each home generates one peak hour trip. And I know we got into the discussion last time with vineyards, or maybe even with phase one of this. The problem is, if you work in Concord, you're not leaving between 7:30 and 8:30. Unfortunately, you're probably leaving at 5:30 or 6. You're not in the peak hour. The peak hour is literally just that 60 minutes. Now, when you throw a school in there, all bets are off, because American Avenue is, I understand, is a mess. And don't get me wrong, there is congestion at the intersection of Grant and Adams because of the school-related activity. But if you look at the history safety-wise, we don't have accidents there. That's because, like what I said before, congestion is safe. You don't get in a fatal accident on the Bay Bridge at 8 o'clock in the morning because everyone's going 4 miles an hour. So congestion is one thing, safety is another. And trust me, my job is to provide as much safety in this town as I can. I'll do everything I can, but if you look at this particular corridor, and I don't think it's fair to lump in this subdivision with what's going on Lone Oak, these people aren't going to be on Lone Oak. It makes absolutely no sense for them to be there. We do have the issue with Marsh Creek Elementary and Vineyards Academy possibly using Lone Oak as a shortcut. And I get that, and we're going to go there with the city council. And we will, once school is back in session, we will do the studies that need to be done again. We've done them once, we'll do them again. I can't do them now because it's summertime and all bets are off.
So back to my question, how long do you think it's going to be for congestion-wise during the peak hours to get out of that development?
The best news here is if you got a kid who goes to school across the street, you can walk. Now, if I live in this subdivision and I need to get out of this town and it's 7:30, I'm probably not going to take a right and head up Adams toward Grant. I'm going to go left to O'Hara. So traffic's like water. It's going to figure out real quick which way do I go, which way do I not go. I'm not going to profess to you that there's no congestion in this area. There will be congestion. People will adapt to it. And it really is dependent on what each of these new residents need to do and where they need to go. They're going to stay away from the intersection of Adam and Grant because, I won't use a technical term, it's a mess, as is every school in this town, but it's a safe mess. We're not seeing accidents. And trust me, I get a copy of every accident that happens in this town. It's all in a database and I can look it up all the time. And I work with PD constantly to make sure that we don't have these things.
Okay, one last try. How long do you think it's going to take to get out of that development during peak hours?
How long is it going to take our development to do what? I'm sorry.
How long will it take a resident to get out of that development during peak hours?
It depends on where they want to go. If they want to get, let's say they want to get to Highway 4, as an example. My guess is they will take a left onto Adams, left onto O'Hara, up to Sand Creek and take Sand Creek to Highway 4, or they'll take a right onto O'Hara and get to Lone Tree and go to Highway 4. They're going to take the path of least resistance. They're not going to get stuck in the school-related traffic, or they'll adjust their schedule and they will leave earlier or later. Traffic's going to adjust. People don't willingly drive into congestion unless that is the only option they have. They have options here. They can go right or left, and they will take the option that more than likely provides them with the least resistance. I can't tell you how long it's going to take.
Commissioner Brandt?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I mean, even coming here at 6 o'clock, you try to make a left turn on O'Hara between some of those stop signs, and I can sit there for 8 to 10 minutes on it during rush hour, right? To try to make a unprotected left onto that. And in this case, it's very similar, albeit different in the sense that there's stoplights on either side versus stop signs. So just wanted to follow that up. I did want to comment specifically on our hands effectively being tied with this using, I believe, what was called out here, the growth management plan that CCTA put together in July of 2020. I just want to read this here for a second. As the city of Brentwood does not currently have an adopted policy document outlining VMT standards, study requirements, or methodology for conducting project VMT analysis, TJKM has based this analysis on requirements adopted by the CCTA in July of 2020 as an amendment to the growth management plan. So essentially, we're sort of, if I'm understanding this right, is like because we haven't done anything to sort of document a standard with how we can all sort of agree upon VMT within the city, we're stuck using the county's model. I just want to ask you, is that an accurate statement?
I don't like the word stuck, but okay. I sat on the subcommittee when they put that whole thing together, and the decision was made that we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. CCTA has done a very good job for what I alluded to before. They are looking at East County under a separate set of circumstances than the rest of the county. So we rely on the CCTA method. Similarly, I rely on the manual of uniform traffic control devices for stop sign warrants, traffic signal warrants. I don't need to reinvent the wheel every single time I need a policy, and if I find a good one, I'll use it. So we rely on the CCTA model.
Okay, so I understand that the CCTA model, from your perspective, is more than sufficient to calculate these VMT standards with application to Brentwood specifically.
Yes, because it's specific to East County, so it makes sense for us.
Okay, thank you.
Council, I saw your mic light up.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sparling. I just thought it might be helpful because I know I'm a few comments behind, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow of your discussion. But I thought it might be helpful for our CEQA consultant to just summarize briefly pages 82 to 85 of the MND, which provides a discussion of the vehicle miles traveled significance conclusions. It also includes those numbers, which our traffic engineer memorized or pulled out right here for you this evening. So if maybe our traffic consultant or our CEQA consultant could kind of provide an overview of that table 6 there in those 3 pages and just kind of provide an overview of the VMT and analysis, which would be kind of, I think, helpful for the record here.
Sure, I could do that. So, so table 6, as you referenced, so that's where the traffic analysts, they looked at 2 different zones because the project is located in 2 different zones, so they split the difference. And so as you can see, one of the zones, the home-based VMT per capita was 19.1, the lowest. The other one was 22.4. They took the average to get 20.77. That's the number they relied on to get this less than significant analysis for VMT. Again, as the traffic engineer had stated, the city of Brentwood average is 29.6 VMT per capita per trip. Would be the more comprehensive way of saying that. And then the East sub-area average would be 24.9. And so what the CCTA, what their methodology allows for is to take the less stringent of the 2 and then take 15% off of that. That's the CEQA threshold, is to take 15% off the less stringent of the 2. And so either way, I believe even if you took it off of the more stringent one, it still ends up being higher. So if you did it for Brentwood, it's 25.16, that's 15% below. East sub area, 15% below, 21.16. Those are higher than the 20.77 previously cited for estimated and modeled for this project. In terms of, again, that home-based VMT per capita. Hopefully that gives a good summary. And then just a couple of things I'll mention. So there's the AM and PM peak hour trips. I don't know if that was mentioned, but that might be useful information for the commission in the morning. So this is what the traffic study provides as well. There's the 27 AM peak hour trips. And then in the evening, the 34 peak hour trips. I think that kind of gives an overview of the VMT discussion.
Thank you.
Any more questions regarding traffic? And then we can move, if there's not, we can move on to another topic. Commissioner Brand?
In table 6, the year 2020 VMT generation, it's described the home-based VMT. Now, is that the home-based work VMT, or is this the, what's the other one? There's 2, right? HBW, HBX. Which one is it?
I couldn't tell you offhand. All I know is the traffic engineers followed the approach they were supposed to under CEQA. I wish I'd give you a better answer.
Okay, yeah, because those two numbers are considerably different. I know at least a rough calculation from 2019 showed, what did it show here? Yeah, I mean, the home-based work VMT was, in Brentwood at least, was almost half compared, the HBW was about half of what HBX was from the 2019 data. So I'm not sure if we have a good answer on that, but yeah, I think just more discussion here as far as that, but if we can't get a good answer, I guess we'll move on.
Well, I'll just say one thing is that the home-based VMT is the metric that is subject to analysis. That's the metric we're supposed to look at here, as far as I understand it. At least, I mean, that's what the traffic engineers, that's what they look at here.
And just to help clarify, that metric is making what assumptions based off of the miles that are being traveled? Is that assuming drop-offs or work commuting, or is it everything? I just help our viewers to understand as well.
Yeah, as far as I understand it, it's looking at the trips that are to and from home. It doesn't, as far as I understand it, it doesn't account for trips that don't have one leg of the trip going either to or from home. I'm pretty sure about that. But again, really what we're looking at here, it's sort of a relative perspective, and it's one of the frustrating things about CEQA sometimes, if to be blunt, is a lot of times you're looking at it from a relative perspective, or you're sometimes really what you're doing is you're using these methodologies sometimes that are coming down from on high. Like in this case, it's coming from OPR, it's coming from this county model, which I think the model is a good model as far as I understand, but it's not a very localized way to analyze this, unfortunately.
Well, it is a very small chunk of land that they're calling out here, all right? South of Grant, along the railroad tracks, more or less, down to the intersection of O'Hara and Adams, I believe. So it's that little kind of triangle in there. So, I mean, it's a relatively specific area that really only has one main arterial road that goes south, i.e. Adams. And then there's no access to this group along Grant. That's just a straight road that goes from O'Hara to Adams. Ask me how I know. I live over there. So the bulk of this traffic is just going to basically be concentrated on O'Hara and Grant. I mean, excuse me, O'Hara and Adams. So I think that's part of the reason that this commission at least seems to be describing a concern with regards to the calculation methodology and the physical results, as well as whether it be our own personal observations or experience driving in this region. But yeah, all right. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Floor.
I just have a quick question for anyone on staff that could answer. Is there the VTM doesn't really show Trellis Circle coming back down and out to Adams Lane again? There's actually two entrances into the Orchard Grove, the main southern area. And I'm just wondering, for purposes of discussion when we get to that, is there a map somewhere where we can see the traffic circulation and all the crosswalks and things that the traffic engineer has been presenting to us?
I don't have that information with me because most of it was conditioned from the first portion of the project on the southern half. I can try to find those plans. I just didn't work on them specifically, so I don't have that in front of me for this project, but I can try to look for them right now.
Okay, I mean, it's not super critical, but it just would, I think, visualization would really help us understand the circulation. So it was just
We can,
Through the
Sarah,
chair.
if that's something that you can look at while we move on to a different topic.
Yeah, through the chair, one thing we could do is pull up the approved plans from the website, Sarah. And then also, I've been using GeoVault a little bit, which is our internal GIS program, of a fairly recent aerial, so it doesn't show, to date development on the site. But if we zoomed in on both the original parcel that's being built on now and the one that's being considered tonight. I think that might help.
Yeah, that would help a lot. Especially if we could see, the foot route down to the park and up to the school and where
Correct.
all the crosswalks are and that kind of stuff.
Okay, I think the next topic that I would like us to discuss, there was questions about it, is the park, or lack of the park, I should say. And I think we have some folks from park here. Commissioner Flory, you had some questions regarding the park.
I do.
Commissioner, my name is Janice Ennis, and I am the park planner. I want to start off with saying I was not here when the conditions of approval were written, but there should have been in lieu fees for not having a park.
Okay.
Because they were saying there weren't.
Through the chair, there
am I
is a
incorrect?
condition of approval for in lieu fees.
Right. And was it Janice or Janet?
Janice.
Janet?
Janice.
Janice. Okay, sorry.
Close enough. Go ahead.
I'm old. All right. So I guess the first question is, so there are in lieu fees. So this is a development that would either have a park or have in lieu fees. It requires a park or in lieu fees. Is that correct?
One or the other.
One or
But
the other.
because it is so small, we preferred to have the in lieu fees, and that money went to the Scranton Creek Sports Complex instead.
Right. And I get that the in lieu fee goes to other larger projects, but those other larger projects don't provide a playground for the children that live in this neighborhood. My concern, and as we heard from the traffic engineer, who I respect a great deal, by the way, I learn something every time I talk to Steve in here. But the fact is that there is no way for engineering to guarantee, and especially when you're talking about minors, that people will obey all of the crosswalks and the blinking lights and the red curbs. I mean, human beings are human beings. So engineering, making their best effort, doing everything they can as experts, can't really make it safe for the children living in these neighborhoods to walk over to Blue Goose on a Saturday morning. And when they get there, they're not going to find a quiet neighborhood park. They're going to find, a quite busy situation with a lot of cars, a lot of people, events. It doesn't fill the need of what a neighborhood park is for. To me, a neighborhood park is for children to have a place to play, for neighbors who live close to each other to congregate and get to know each other. Sand Creek Sports Complex is something that I think is great. I mean, I'm a big proponent of it. I've spoken positively about it many times, but to me, it seems like we need a park. And I feel like without a park, this project is going to have a hard time moving through city council, honestly. I've just been watching them, and I've been watching the decisions they've been making. And I am supportive of their position that we need to have neighborhood parks and meaningful neighborhood parks. So, but I think the question I had for you is this is a neighborhood that would require either a park or an in lieu fee. And we've opted for the in lieu fee, but I think I have another question for council, but I think I'm going to hold that question for just a second in case anybody else has any questions for you. Thank you so much.
Before I go, the in lieu fee was because the park area is so small. It's only 0.3. That does not give a significant amount of play space. Because when you put in equipment for children, there's fall zones that are dictated by the state of California that have to be mitigated. The other thing is, No one has mentioned Caboose Park, which is a quarter mile away. So this area is actually between two city parks. So you should also be aware of that. It's not that far.
Where is Caboose Park in relation to the?
And our gap zone is a half a mile from every neighborhood. So this neighborhood is in between two. It does fall right in there.
Would the children have to cross Adams Lane or O'Hara to get to both of those?
One, I know of for sure.
Well, I'm sitting next to a commissioner who's familiar with the map. All right, so I get that. There's a park, there's a couple parks they could walk to. And I do appreciate that. So thank you so much.
May I address Commissioner Johnson's remark before
Yes.
I go?
Yep.
Regarding the trees, I have seen that, and we are putting in root barriers next to sidewalks. We're also changing the way the trees are watered, and I do look at the trees now that I'm here. And if it's too big, I'll let developers know the tree cannot go there. Thank you.
Before you go, I want to make sure Commissioner Brand doesn't have any questions for you.
I have a few. You described the number 0.3. I assume that's in reference to the acreage of a potential park?
That is correct.
Okay, and what would we say the minimum sized acceptable park is based off of, I think you had described some kind of California regulation with respect to some variables?
That's for play area space, depending on how many kids would be there. But in 2019, they did a study for their policies, and at that point, they were in favor of having bigger parks because you can have more gatherings than having all these small fragmented parks. And part of it was because of maintenance. I'll be honest, the city is watching what it's spending, and they rather go with something big and add parking to it rather than all these neighborhood parks where they really can't have the bigger play equipment. Also, there are also size dimensions, whether or not they get credit back, because the parks are not free. When a developer builds a park and it meets certain criteria, they have reimbursement. This would not meet that.
Okay, so like as in reference, Portofino Park, that's just grass. And that's, directly to the north adjacent to Lone Tree. And yeah, it doesn't get a whole lot of traffic to your point in the sense
It
that
doesn't get a whole lot of use.
everyone's going to go to Seedling, everyone's going to go to Dolphin because there's structures there, right? And
Exactly.
It's part of it. They're in my rotation, so I understand. Going back to, so referencing the 0.3, right, insufficient to meet the needs of a structured mentioned park.
For equipment, for children to play,
Equipment-based park, yes. Thank you. Now, translating that to the in lieu fee, which would then, I think you said, would go towards the Sand Creek Sports Complex.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to do the math in my head, and it doesn't really make sense to me. Maybe you can help. What is the reduction to by not having a park and going with an in lieu fee, what would be the hit to our goal of 5 acres per park, 5 acres of park per 1,000 residents? Is there maybe just a ballpark, if you could help me out there?
It's hard to say because the Sand Creek Sport Complex is underfunded at this time.
Right, and so the way that I'm working it out in my head is, okay, so we're taking the in lieu fee, in this case, putting it towards the Sand Creek Sports Complex. I can't translate the loss of I'm having difficulty translating the loss from the park, a potential park in this development, and how that would translate to the in lieu fees contributing to another park. I don't know how it
balances
if there's a delta,
out.
how it nets out. I don't know, maybe if that calculation has been done, I would love to know what the result is.
I can get you that calculation, but it's roughly close to $9,000 per housing unit if they do the in lieu. But if they build the park, we end up paying them a reimbursement based on their fees. So usually we come out better when they pay in lieu fees than building a park.
So based on your understanding of this, the contribution to the Sand Creek Sports Complex via in lieu fees from this development
It's greater in this
would be a
case.
net positive from a park's perspective. Am I hearing that right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions regarding park?
I just have a quick question. I think this is for council. The question I have is we can either have a park or an in lieu fee. And the recommendation that's being presented to us is that we accept the in lieu fee. But as commissioners or even for the city council, is this something where we have discretion? Could we say we prefer one over the other and ask that to be included into the project? Could we say we prefer a park? Could we say we prefer an in lieu fee? Or is this something that we must take the recommendation from staff?
So the short answer is that no, that as long as they comply with one or the other, that they can move forward with the project.
Okay, so we would not be able to insist on one or the other.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. What other, so there's a topic that was brought up about fences by a member of the public, but also Commissioner Brand had questions about fences, and I waved him to say, we'll ask more questions later. So why don't we start with your questions around the fencing? Because I know I have some questions around the fencing for this project.
Okay, so in looking at the diagram, actually, I don't know who this question would be good for. Sarah, maybe? So just to make sure we're all on the same page here, we've got dividing all of the homes, essentially. We have a good neighbor fence. That's the 6-foot regular good neighbor fence, not the enhanced one. Is that correct? Okay.
Sorry, yes, that's correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
I just, because ever since I saw that other picture of the wall being adjacent to the two-spoke fence, I've kind of confused. Okay. Then starting from Adams Lane going east, we've got the 6-foot, not masonry, but concrete wall separated by the planting strip and the curb, or the sidewalks in between that. But and then moving to the north end, adjacent to Vineyard Academy, that fence is a enhanced wooden fence.
Let me switch screens real quick. Give me just a second. Sorry about that.
Sarah, while you're doing that, Orchard, the original Orchard Grove development, where we ended, I believe, the discussion, and I believe from driving around, I saw it, I don't know if I could use the word entire development is surrounded by a masonry wall.
Yeah.
The southern property line is with a masonry wall or a solid wall.
And then on Lone Oak as well is masonry. And it changes heights. Not on Lone Oak, but on Gracie Lane. It goes up. Correct? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Best, for. Okay. The reason why I bring that up is because I think where I'm going with the fencing is that's the look and feel of the development. And it's of my opinion that should just be continued around the rest of it for continuity, because it's going to look awfully weird if masonry walls changes to something else. And I think specifically the area of my primary concern is both on Lone Oak, right? Because you have residents there who, as a group, collectively wanted a masonry wall there. And then also where the school is as well, for privacy for the residents, but from the increased population of the school. And if you're going to put it, in my opinion, if you're going to put it at the school, then it should continue down until it meets Lone Oak. There's nothing, we don't know what's going to go behind the rock in Lone Oak because it's right now undeveloped and there are no current applications that I know of at least. So I think, because when we talk about fences,
The portables are going over there.
well, right, but but there's a lot behind it, right? That is, yeah. So when you think about where the trees are, where you're looking at the map, so to kind of, I mean, that's to me what would make the development look the best and would give privacy to the residents of Lone Oak, and then give more privacy to the residents who abut the Vineyard Academy as well as the Rock Church versus a 6-foot good neighbor fence that, quite frankly, if that's the fence that's going to stay there, is not in the best condition from when I walked it yesterday. Do any commissioners have any thoughts on that?
Can I was driving down on the southern, I guess that's, I guess it's Gracie, that southern part where that brick wall is. So there, I don't know, because are there going to be landscaped on the outside of that brick wall
Yes.
all the way around?
Yes, that was
Okay.
part of the,
All right.
that was part of the original.
Okay. Then when we're coming up on Lowen Oak, you got that parcel there, and then you got the bio retention. Are we talking about putting a fence in front of the bio retention, or
There'll be a fence there. The question is what fence?
would it be that brick wall fence in front of the bio retention?
That's
Is that
what
we're proposing?
What is I'm proposing. If other commissioners have other ideas.
So on that bio retention area, who's gonna, I was doing a little research on this, and it's supposed to, and I see that we have some trees here. Who's gonna maintain this area to beautify it? I guess what I'm asking is, if we put the fence there, or is somebody gonna maintain it, or is this gonna be the HOA, excuse me, maintaining this bio retention area and beautifying it, or?
Well, part of that would be a question for engineering of who's
I
gonna.
think that's the city's responsibility, if I remember correctly.
In terms of the basin, I think in front of the basin, there is going to be that, how do I say, it is a 2 feet
Split rail fence.
split rail fence, so it
2
won't
foot
be-
split
yeah,
rail fence.
So you can, and in the basin in itself, there will be some landscaping which complies with the stormwater permit process. So there are certain types of trees that goes in there. And if I'm not mistaken, there will be a district formed for maintenance of it.
So my only question is what would be more beautiful, or what would the residents want? I guess I don't know. The continuity of the brick wall would be one way, or how well is this going to be maintained? Is it going to look, maybe give it some aspect of nature or something? But that would be
There's a lot of these in this area. So you can find one right off of O'Hara, off of Nighthawk Way. There's one there. It's actually, the backstop of it is walls, and then it's open essentially to the street. Many of them are surrounded by chain link fences and things of that nature, but there has to be some kind of access that would,
There
right.
is an access road to the basin.
Right.
Right, and that's coming off of Lone Oak though, right?
That is coming off of the Trellis Circle East Loop.
Okay,
There is
so
a driveway.
So the inlet, so it would presumably, I guess, to the chair's point, is that we could, essentially close off that access on the Lone Oak side, because there would be maintenance access via Trellis Circle.
And my main concern is really for the I should have clarified that part. My concern about the wall is specifically for lot 33, lot 34, lot 32, and lot 31, right? For that, not necessarily on Lone Oak itself.
Not Lone Oak?
Yeah.
You're talking about the backside of the bio retention.
Sure.
Through the chair, so behind 33 and 34, that is going to be a 6-foot wall.
Masonry wall?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, and behind 32 and 31? Masonry?
Yes.
Because then, so it's the
yes.
north side, that has 3 different potential looks, correct? That was one of the,
On this,
on the north side. So from lot 22 to lot 31.
It's going to be a 6
Yes.
feet enhanced good neighbor fence
Right.
Good neighbor fence.
The whole way
the whole way.
on the north side.
And did we get clarification on the different heights?
So I would like to defer to the applicant for that,
Okay.
but my understanding is on the north side, it says 6-foot good neighbor fence with 1 foot retaining max. My understanding is the overall height would still be 6 feet. It's just 1 foot of that is retaining.
Yeah.
Or
so-
is the height going to change? I guess the question is whether it's going to be 6 feet of the wall plus another foot of retaining. And then in this area further to the east, you have 2.5 feet of retaining. So does that mean that the wall is then 8.5 feet tall?
Yeah, so I think what Chairman Sparling is reacting to along Gracie is the fact that the grade changes of the lots as you go across, right? And so the wall therefore has to follow the grade. And so the wall will always be a minimum, or fence will always be a minimum of 6 or 7 feet relative to one side or the other, right? So it's always got a minimum of 6 feet on the lot side and 7 feet on the public side. So the height of that fence and or wall just varies to make sure that both of those minimums are met.
Right, so I think just, I wanted for clarification was, is it going to be a total of 8 feet on, because it says 6 foot good neighbor fence plus 2.5 foot,
It
retaining
will,
wall.
in that case, it may end up being 8 feet from one side, the
From one
low
side.
side of
Got it.
that
Okay.
property boundary. Yes.
That was one of my questions.
Correct.
Let's, we'll probably end up coming back to this topic, but let me ask a simple question related to fencing, right? So when these homes are sold, the good neighbor fences are going to be included in the price of the house?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if I think I can help clarify the question on the wall along Lone Oak, but I think you actually got there. But it's true that the property line between the detention basin and lots, excuse me, I have to put my glasses on, 31 and 32, there will be a wall, right? And that wall will wrap around lot 32 to a certain point until it becomes the front yard, right? And then it'll terminate. And then we have to remember that Mrs. McCoy, who is going to maintain her residence on the bottom right corner, she gets access off of Lone Oak. So the wall on the Orchard Grove 1 property comes up to the bottom right corner of her property and returns. And then,
Correct.
yeah, and comes around. And so essentially the whole frontage of Lone Oak is open on its frontage.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I misspoke when I was talking about behind the homes, not
Yeah.
actually on Lone Oak. So since you're up here, changing the good neighbor fencing from lots 22 to lot 31, building a masonry wall instead of good neighbor fencing so it matches the other side of the development. Because right now, I think even in the conversation we had in 2022, you even mentioned that masonry walls are more appropriate for commercial transition into residential to commercial. So certainly I would want, I would ask, and obviously it's up to the commission to, if they agree, is along the section where the Rock Church, which is in school, instead of having a good neighbor fence, have a masonry wall there. Because what I'm envisioning is what would look better if we have just one continuous type of fence down the wall. And if we're going to put it next to to separate the Rock Church property and Vineyard School, then that wall should just continue down until behind, like we just discussed, behind lot 31, versus a good neighbor fence.
Yeah, so we proposed the good neighbor fence because technically the Rock Church is zoned residential and its existing use is under a conditional use permit. So at some point in time that may convert to residential, and anyway, that's why we proposed it. We would not necessarily be opposed to putting a wall there instead if it pleases the commission.
Okay, thank you. I just think it would make it, it would just make it the look and feel, because it's really, I know it's 2 developments, but it's really going to have the look and feel of one 5 years from now when it's done.
That's correct. That's the intent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only people that see the other side are Rock Creek Church.
Yeah.
So I would actually request that maybe you allow us to communicate with the church as to what they would like to see in that location, because they, it affects them as well, whether it's a wall or a fence.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. And again, it's up to the other commissioners. I'm championing this because I also want to make sure that the residents who are buying homes that you're going to sell them for, based on your average selling price in Brentwood, starts at 800,000 and probably will go to $1 million by the time it's done, right? So I want to make sure they have a good level of privacy from what we know is there today. And then there's an empty lot, which may be commercial, may be residential, depends upon what it's being developed behind it, right? And that just solves that problem in advance. I know it costs a little bit more to do that, but I think it ends up with, my personal opinion is it ends up with a better look and feel for the area.
You actually may be pushing me to do something that I should do anyway, and it would benefit myself and my future home buyers. So yeah, like I said, we would not be opposed to that.
Thank you. Any other questions on fencing?
I do have a quick question. You'll notice on all the vesting tentative maps that we have, the 4 pages, we can actually see, continuing down Lone Oak, we can see lots 43, 42, and 51 of the neighboring development being built to the south. But here on the fence plan, which for the public, we're looking at a plan that has been handed to us on paper, so you won't be able to see it if you're looking at the packet that was distributed. But this plan pretty much ends at the bottom of Trellis Circle. So I don't have a fence plan that shows me the continuity along Lone Oak, which was what one of the callers was asking about, that as you progress south, and I think I heard Mr. Best say this, but just want to verify that as you progress south, where the 6-foot masonry wall comes out to Lone Oak, and then that goes on down behind 51 and 50, and probably down to the entrance, down to the entrance at Gracie or wherever that terminates. We'd have to look at the old plan, but so there is going to be continuity, and the only break in the continuity on Lone Oak is going to be the rail fencing that will run along the bioretention area, which is hopefully going to be a nice green space for people to look at, and then along in front of the existing homestead there that the property owner would be responsible for maintaining. The city would maintain this green space at the retention. The property owner would maintain their home, of course, and then there would be a concrete, the masonry wall, which matches all these other masonry walls, would just extend from the south border of the remainder parcel on down to wherever it goes. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I have put on the screen here a combo plan of both of the developments.
Oh, cool.
You can see, as indicated with these lines with the hash marks or the dots on it, that's the fence lines, and then the solid lines are showing solid masonry walls. So that may help paint a better picture. I can also pull up the first Southern Projects map and show you what that looks like as well, but that's not combined with the northern part. This is the only document I have where it shows kind of both of them together.
And it looks like the retention area at the bottom right also maybe has that rail fence
That's
facing
correct.
the streets, and then it has the wall extends behind it. But behind 50 and 51 there, you have the masonry wall. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding, and I can pull up the map, the tentative plan, if you need as well.
No, I see it. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Commissioner Johnson, do you have?
No, I was just going to say about your idea about the fencing along the north side. I agree with that we should have that brick wall.
So I see we have engineering here tonight, and I don't know that we can ask the applicant to change what I'm about to ask at this point, given that there's two developments really that are one development. But I want to have I'd like to have a conversation if it's allowable to have this conversation. So, and then it's about the buyer retention area that's here. So heard comments from the commissioners about wanting to have a park in the area. There is a way that we can have a park in this area. There's an area, and for future developments, right? These plans are already in. It's going to be kind of tough to change, but we've had a developer come forward here in the last few months who's used pervious asphalt. And if pervious asphalt is used, bioretention areas can be either completely eliminated or vastly reduced, which creates space for a park. My feeling is bioretention areas are also somewhat of a hazard to small children, animals, and they're not, we can try to make them as pretty as we can, but they are what they are. And so what I'd like to understand is if engineering has an opinion on pervious asphalt, because I think that pervious asphalt, I've looked at, not an expert, but I've done a lot of research. I've seen it used from reading articles in all kinds of climates, in the Pacific Northwest, in Arizona. It's been used in Arizona on a highway for 20 years with little reported problems from what I could see. So does engineering have an opinion on pervious asphalt for this development, but also future developments in Brentwood so that we can get rid of bioretention and create either more space for an additional home or larger parks? Or move parks?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Commissioner. I think the issue here is the city doesn't have a standard for a pervious pavement. And what happens is we don't have guidelines for maintenance, and we don't have guidelines on the sectional that requires on a pervious pavement. So I understand one project was approved with pervious pavement, but that was privately maintained. So that roads will not be maintained by the city. So what in such situations, if this is going to be a city-owned, maintained roadway, we need to have some standards in place for these type of road pervious payments. It is doable, but the issue is there's going to be significant changes needed to the plans. And I think the developer should also be in agreement with all of that.
Thank you. Any other, we've spent a lot of time talking about the first resolution. We haven't talked, there's no more questions or comments about that. Is there questions about the actual design review? Sarah, maybe you can put up the actual design elements.
Give me just a second to get to that page.
Yep.
Sorry.
And I want to, while Sarah's doing that, I told her this in the briefing before the meeting, but I wanted to compliment her. I have not seen this before. It may have been there, but it didn't catch my eye in terms of the interim objective design standards was very clearly laid out with some highlights for us to pay attention to, which I really appreciated because there are some things that we have to take into consideration that are a little bit different for the design standards because of some of the lots and some of the designs.
I apologize. It
That's
froze
okay.
on me for a second.
Trying to buy you time.
Thank you. Okay.
Does any commissioner have questions or comments regarding the design elements of either the single-family homes or the duets? Commissioner Brand?
Yeah, I think one of the specific ones called out in the document that the chair was describing is both sets of duets don't have entrance facing the street, right? They have these, entrances facing outward. That falls outside of our requirement for the interim objective design standards. I'm just curious as to why that can't be fulfilled. Maybe I don't know if yeah, Mr. Best.
So that question is geometry. And because of, trying to get to the, even the 8,000 square foot minimum lot size on the internal block, we were left with kind of skinny lots up on the top. And so in order to get to the density that we were looking for to meet density bonus and the zoning, we had to put one of the duets behind Mrs. McCoy's property, as you can see, and then the other one needed to go along the top row of lots because that's where it fit. If we tried to put it on the corners, then we would lose lots. So it's an issue of geometry.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
Commissioner Floor, did you have?
I'm still waiting to see oh, there it is. Let me, I have to pull the Zoom back up.
And so if you look at the architecture that I think Sarah had up earlier, the only kind of issue I think is the fact that the front door to the home is actually accessed on the side as you're looking at it from the street. But we've tried to make the architecture attractive so you have a pathway and depending on the elevation, an arch or an entry into that front porch area that gets you to the front door. There you go. Thank you. So it kind of looks like a big house with a 4-car garage, and then the front door swings around to the side.
Commissioner Floor?
Yeah, I am appreciative that these have don't seem to have so many flat sides. Flat sides is something that's been called out in the past, although at least the backyards have some pop outs and stuff. If we could see a side elevation of any of these houses.
Of the,
Of
is
the
there
actual-
specific,
yeah.
of the duets?
Yeah, not necessarily the duets, but like Plan 2C looks pretty flat on the side. Any of those.
I agree.
What page are you on, Sarah?
Of the
Where you're at right now, what page is
packet is 730, it looks like.
that? Okay.
So I think, Mr. Best, what Commissioner Floor is referring to is there's I spoke to Sarah about this yesterday, there's on the side elevations for both, I think it's Plan 4 and Plan 1. And Commissioner Floor may have spotted something I didn't. There's a lot of empty space on those development, on the side views. And we know that there's a fence that obviously protects part of that from view, but in comparison to your other designs of similar models, there's a lot more massing and articulation in that. So is there a reason why you couldn't make the side elevations a little bit more interesting?
Well, certainly on the single stories, because the fence hides the majority of that facade of the home, we like to lean towards letting the interior of the home dictate how that elevation, because when you have pop outs on the side elevation, you got to deal with that on the inside, right? And it affects the floor plans. And so, yeah, typically that first story element is relatively flat a lot of times because the garage takes up half of that length of that wall. And so you won't have any windows there. And then what we've tried to do on the sides of the elevations of the single stories is do some nice things with the roof lines, and that you can see that there's a gable end treatment on a few of the elevations to kind of enhance that gable end when it occurs on the sides. And then of course, the 2-story homes, you know, the side elevations, even and the rear elevations, we think we've made them pretty interesting, with shed roofs coming down from the second story to the first story, and then some articulation and elevation on the second story, which is what's really prominent when you're viewing it from the street. This particular Plan 4 elevation on, I think, that is at the right side.
Yes.
It does look a little flat. Part of that, I think, is because you're probably responding to the massing that's below the second story windows there. So that is mostly dictated by the interior of the home. So if you look at the floor plan and you see how the interior of the home is laid out there, that particular area doesn't really lend itself well to windows or other articulation.
Commissioner Johnson?
Is there a way we can do something with maybe like window I don't want to say treatment system, or articulation is probably a better word around, because what it just kind of, it wants to look like a barn just on the backside. I understand that everybody's not going to see that or some of it, but maybe just some design around the windows so it doesn't look so flat.
So we're looking at a Plan 4 elevation right now. So you have window shutters on one of the second story windows there that is kind of prominent with the shed roof coming down from the second story to the first. And then the window, there are window treatments on the second floor. It's not super obvious in this elevation. But Sarah, did we provide you with some details as to how windows would be trimmed out?
So in the original one,
Yeah.
because I just watched it this afternoon, right? There seemed to be, and again, maybe slightly different elevations, but there seemed to be a lot more detail around the windows in the Orchard Grove 1 or original. I'm not sure what the right terminology you want to use for that description, but there seems to be in some of the plans, I'm not going to say all of them, there was a lot more detail around the windows, as Commissioner Johnson asked about.
Yeah, so these elevations should be relatively identical. We had to make some changes to meet the objective design standards that were adopted between the two projects. And I think most of that was an enhancement. But Sarah's pulled up here a detail of how all of the windows are trimmed out. If they don't have shutters or whatnot on them, you can see that there's foam headers and jams that trim out all of those windows. So it's not like you're just seeing the essentially the fin of the window and then straight stucco right to the end. So all of the windows are trimmed.
Commissioner Flohr, does that answer your question or concern?
Pretty much. I'm kind of looking at Plan 2 right now. Don't we usually like to have a little bit of a, it looks like we have on the left, yeah, we have a little bit of a wraparound, so I think that's probably sufficient. I don't really have a big problem with it.
Commissioner Brand, any comments or questions for Mr. Best around design elements?
I more or less concur with what I think my fellow commissioners have described. There's some of these, especially the right elevations on Plan 4, extremely boxy from my perspective in the middle. Not great. Ideal. I mean, it's nice that it's not the rear, but you know, the good neighbor fence only insulates a very small portion of it, and essentially you're looking at a lot. And because of I can't recall, I'd have to plant a lot of these on the actual map itself, but yeah, a lot of these, like on the right elevation, it seems like, what was Plan 4?
Well, again, because that's the kitchen, and so the way the kitchen's laid out, that wall doesn't lend itself to any windows because it's all cabinetry and countertop and whatnot. Otherwise, you would see a window there, and that's why you kind of have that large mass of uninterrupted.
Can anything? I understand the functionality. You can't put a window or a door there, right? But even when I drove around the area, so the immediate area of homes, over the 6-foot good neighbor fence on side elevations, I saw every house had, you know, whether it was a foam bump out. I'm not sure what the technical term is for, right? But
Right.
something that broke up the straight wall that I wouldn't think would add a lot of cost to the home. And quite frankly, you're going to, if it does, you're going to add that onto the price of the home anyways. So I think from a design standpoint, especially, I think everyone's called out specifically Plan 4, that long space between the window and what I assume is a garage.
Yes.
That's an awful lot of flat space. So I think that's what I'm hearing from fellow commissioners is if there's something that could be done just to make that a little bit more interesting, not a window, not a door, but I mean, on the side of my house, I have a side yard that is similar length to this, and all it has is a foam.
Yeah, you're talking about almost a ledger board that comes
Yeah.
across on the top
Yes,
plate
it breaks
elevation.
up the plane.
Yeah, so we could certainly work on something like that.
Okay. Would that meet everyone's concern about the design element? There was a question about, from a caller, I just want to address, you've already, I think already answered it, but from a Plan 33, 34 standpoint, it was put in the back. Is there any other lot that you can move that to? Can you flip that with any other lot?
Well, that's also a geometry question.
Yeah.
If Sarah can bring up the site plan, because we're preserving as much of Mrs. McCoy's property as possible. She wanted to have a certain depth in her backyard from her existing home. And so that created that little rectangle there that lots 33 and 34 are sitting on right now. So the duet homes, which are much shallower, they're not nearly as deep as the other homes, fit perfectly in that box. If I were to move that duet to another place, then I'd have to try to put a standard home on that property, and that would squeeze Mrs. McCoy.
Okay.
So that's why it's there. And it's, I mean, I'm not sure why it being in the back of the subdivision matters. Is there a reason that that's not palatable?
I'm just getting an answer from a question. It's because when I looked at it, I actually personally, I don't mind the placement of it because when I look at these duets, a lot of times for the affordable homes that are being built as part of these projects, their yards seem to get squeezed. And I think when I looked at the size of the yard for the duets, I was actually very pleased with the amount of space that they're going to get in terms of a backyard. I don't care about the front yard, I care about the backyard.
In fact, lots 26 and 27 probably get some of the biggest backyards of the whole project.
Yes.
And also, if Sarah has the ability to bring up the site plan that shows both products together, you'll see in total, when we combine the two, you're going to have, there's two duets right there on Adams. There's one in the back, back corner, and then there's one behind Mrs. McCoy's place, and so they're fairly well distributed throughout the subdivision.
One last question for you about Ms. McCoy. I just want to make sure that she's comfortable with a two-story. Obviously didn't write a letter. We didn't see a letter. You've obviously are buying this product. Is they comfortable with a two-story?
Yes. We've been in very close communication with her about how we treat that transition between her home and the homes behind her.
And you have an agreement to knock down the barn?
We have an agreement to knock down the barn, yes.
Okay. Any other questions on the design element? Okay.
Thank you.
Any comments about any concerns that we have not addressed or other topics that we have not addressed for this project?
No, I just want to say something just in favor of neighborhood parks. It's not any secret that I live on a golf course that was closed, and we've done a lot of research about what we might like to see there. And what I've learned is that parks are the one thing that even more than being on a golf course will raise your property values. So I tend to really favor these neighborhood parks. They tend to lift up the value of the neighborhood. And they provide a place for the community to congregate, for the children to play. And, I get that there are parks nearby, but they're across a busy street. And we're talking about little kids. They don't always remember to look left and right. And these are our, our most precious thing is our children. So I sure would like to see a park here. I'm told by council I can't insist, but I would, if I had the ability to insist, I would probably insist on a park. So it is what it is.
Commissioner Brand?
Lot that's really well said here today. I agree. I believe that the value in even having a small park as opposed to in lieu fees is, we can't talk much more about it, but it would definitely be my preference here. And, the main difference is that we have a variety of parks in our city, many of which we would consider, well, at least my perspective is, I consider them to be the neighborhood park versus what I would call a city park. Blue Goose is a great example of a city park. It's one of the few locations where you can actually make a reservation for a birthday party or something of that nature, just like veterans. And so it's got a water feature, right? These are considerable amenities that you don't typically find in a neighborhood park. Typically, a neighborhood park is grass, a equipment structure type deal, and then maybe a sandbox or something. And so I'm calling out that specific difference because it's local. It's what unifies that particular housing development / community, as opposed to a much larger park, which kind of serves the greater needs of the city itself. So in addition to that, I do like the design. I think the duet compromise really invites even the lower, both pairs of duets are very inviting to the community and are very representative of what I would consider to be the remainder of the home designs, which is fantastic. The spacing is great. I don't love the spacing on the other division, but that's not on the table here today. And let's see what else. As far as the MND is concerned, I think there's been a lot said here about VMT and in general traffic analysis. And frankly, I still don't have a great sense of confidence in the data that was presented today. And I'm finding it personally difficult to make a decision in that regard based off of all of the evidence put forward, all of the data. And so I'd love to hear more on it. And, short of us being here all night, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Commissioner Johnson?
I like the accommodations that Shay is willing to do in terms of the brick wall, maybe some design elements on the building, on the rear parts of the buildings. I'm a little concerned about I'm concerned about the traffic in that general area and on that road. Myself, like Commissioner Brand, I don't necessarily understand how we calculate this increased traffic exactly. But I like the building. I like the way they did the duets. I have a hard time with the traffic a little bit and making sure I understand the impact. But I understand what the traffic manager said.
So there's one item I did not address in my notes, and that is regarding the landscape plans and defensible space. So as I was trying to get it wrapped up, I also realized I've missed a check on my note. So we have preliminary landscape plans. And one of the things with defensible space that is not today in our design standards yet, and the reason why I asked for it to be done separately, and we'll see if that ends up happening, is because I had a conversation with ex-Commissioner Ziegler this week about defensible space and the 2 different types of defensible space. There's 2 different types of defensible space. Think about Trilogy, and Trilogy abuts an area which is grassland, right, that can burn very quickly and cause all kinds of problems. That's not this, because this is a developed area. Defensible space, insurance companies are requiring homes to have 5 feet of protected space completely around their properties. And so from a landscape standpoint, this landscape plan would not meet that because we have lawn. And again, I know this isn't, it's hard to see on this preliminary, and it's only preliminary. But I think what we need to make sure in the conditions of approval is that we put in defensible space around 5 feet around the homes for landscape. What that means is it can't be something that can burn. Can't be tan bark, can't be lawn, can't be ground cover. If two others agree with me on that, because there are situations today in Brentwood that homeowners are not able to get home insurance renewed, or they're getting it canceled. Insurance companies are literally flying drones above homes to see if defensible space is there or not. So the last thing I would want to do is have Mr. Best sell all these homes, and then someone can't get insurance. It's an easy fix. It can be done, what I would like to do, because it's not in our objective design standards yet, or the interim ones, is I need to understand from council how we can do that. Can we refer it back to the design subcommittee for the final landscape plans to make sure it has defensible space? Can we just make it a condition of approval? How do we do that?
I would just suggest, since you're a recommending body today, this project is going to the council, that we just include that note in your recommendation, and then staff will include it as part of the project that the council considers.
Okay. Any questions or thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, the one thing I would, oh, sorry, Commissioner Floyd, real quick. The one thing I would clarify, though, if the commission is inclined to do that, is to specify what body the plan would come back to. Would it go back to staff? Would it go to the subcommittee, or even the full commission? So, okay, thank you.
Well, this is an SB 330, so I think we might be under the 5 meeting time limit. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that would be fine in this case because it's post-approval.
Oh, perfect. In that case, first of all, I want to say I totally support the defensible space. It's a huge issue, and I think that I would be supportive of a recommendation. And because these are recommendations, we can insert recommendations. So we can at least express our concerns about the lack of a park and the concerns about the traffic flow around the area. If we did move to recommend these things, we can add text, I think, for those things. But I think probably the defensible space is probably the most immediate concern that could actually be addressed right away. So is that something that we should do, is maybe just make some recommendations?
Yeah, I think that we need to, in my list, the way I have to check is do we have enough support on the commission for a masonry wall along lots 22 down to 31? I'd also suggest that we make lot 31 remain a single story as a condition of approval. Applicant said he has no plans to change it, but given that's a single story and that there is residence on Lone Oak, lot 32 is, there's a corner there where there's a homeowner there that is going to be impacted. Lot 32 has the bioretention pond behind it right away. So lot 32, I'm not concerned about. The other one is the defensible space. I think those would be the recommendations. That when someone makes a motion, I would like to see included in it is, as long as we get 2 others to support that. But also, I mean, my feeling overall on the project, right? I have concerns about the traffic. I've expressed concerns both in the original meeting and in this meeting about the concerns of the impact to the residents of Lone Oak and Gracie Lane. That's going to be addressed at the city council meeting later this month. I think this is a unique space in Brentwood, and it's these homes. While Shea has the right to build these homes because they own the land, or soon will own the land, we just need to make sure that we protect the current residents. I've made that statement before where I think we do a good job planning for future residents, but we have to make sure that we're doing a good job planning for current residents. And protecting Lone Oak and Gracie Lane is a way to do that. Commissioner Brand, your comments about VMT, traffic studies to me they're not logical and they don't ring true to me as well. It's a bureaucratic exercise, and it's no offense to the folks who work on them. It just is. It doesn't. I can't ever make sense of them to how I actually live in Brentwood. I'm overall the rest of the project is great. I really the affordable homes that are going to be built. I mean, these homes are going to be sold well below market rate, moderate income level. This year will be homes sold for $558,000. A very low income would be $120,000, and low income dwelling unit would be $232,000 according to our city website. And so I think that really opens up homes that are affordable, and it will make some families that today can't afford a home be able to move into the city that we all love, which is Brentwood. So overall, even though I have concerns with the traffic, and unless we're going to deny this for safety reasons because of the traffic, that's really the only reason why I could think of a reason that we would deny it, because we have to have an actual reason to deny it. We can't deny it just because we don't like it. And so I'm overall, given that, the state laws that you all have heard me rant about many times, I won't do that tonight, but this is what happens when we have people who don't live here forcing their opinions upon us. This project is a good project. It matches the sister project to the south. And overall, I think it's going to have a nice look and feel, and I appreciate Mr. Best agreeing to the masonry wall, because I think that'll make a better product for his buyers as well as the school on the other side. So with that, I will look for a motion.
So we have to figure out which one of these documents, which one of those recommendations goes on.
Did you bring up the specifics of the design review with regards to the?
If I may, April, I can share my screen. I've drafted some potential conditions of approval, and we can tweak them if needed.
Sure, thank you.
And I was going through placing them on which resolution, but I haven't quite finished yet.
Aren't the resolutions 21, 22, and 23? I don't know what 29, 30, and 30. At least that's how it's on the
Yeah, on the agenda. On the agenda, it's 24-021 for the mitigated
Sorry.
negative deck.
What was it, 24?
24-021.
Oh.
And the other one is 24-022. Am I reading that right?
Sorry about that.
Oh, and
The design review is 23.
yes.
Okay.
Whoops.
It was.
You've got a 22 and two 23s, Sarah. And we have a.
The top one is 21, middle is 22.
So yeah, for the masonry that's part of the map, so 22, and the last two are part of the design review. Let's see.
I think there's a discrepancy with the red agenda. So,
oh, is it wrong?
yeah, in the actual packet. Sorry about that. In the actual packet, it's the MND would be 24-028, and then the tentative map would be 029, and the design review 030.
Ah, okay.
That's the way it was.
Sarah, I'd also like to add, I was talking about if we could look at the tree, making sure that the roots systems of the trees that we plant in there won't upset the sidewalks in the coming years.
We can tweak the language. I was just trying to get it out.
Well, one thing I would do through the chair on the very top condition for the wall is just to make some note that it would also match, just so there's no confusion about it being a separate type of masonry wall, that it would match the other existing masonry wall.
On Orchard Grove on the
Yeah.
south. Yeah.
Just from a design perspective.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Mr. Best, if I can have you come up to the, we're putting these in because this is what we want, but I also, if you have any objections, now's the time to raise them.
I appreciate that. On the elevation question, I thought we were just talking about the Plan 4, but if you want to talk about the Plan 3 and 4,
Commission, we specifically talked about Plan 4. Do you have concerns about the other 2 stories?
there's only one other two-story. The 3 and the 4 are the only 2.
Okay.
And it's just on the right
It was the right
side
side, yeah.
elevation.
I think it was just 4. I didn't really have a problem with
Okay.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, if that could be the Plan 4 right side elevation, which was the point, then that'd be helpful. The rest of them, I think I'm fine with. I'm just not really certain what the 5-foot defensible space means to me.
So from a landscape standpoint, right? So this would really be, for your purposes, would be the front yard, right? Because you don't
We don't landscape the rears.
You don't do
Yeah.
the side and the back, right?
Right. Well, we do the sides up to the wing fence, but yes.
Right. So there needs to be 5 feet of essentially as I understand it, I'm not the insurance guy, right?
Mhm.
But as I understand it, 5 feet of non-burnable product. So basically it would be rock, concrete, crushed something that can't burn. That's what is getting people, believe it or not, that's what's getting
It's an
insurance
insurance,
tonight.
it's an insurance issue.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to, the reason why I brought it up a few meetings ago, and it's gonna be brought up in every design review, is because people are getting denied because they don't have that space.
Right. And I guess my only concern there is that I believe your city also has a standard that you can't exceed a certain percentage of the front yard as hard surface. So in some of these lots, if you add that plus the driveway, you're going to you may end up violating your own ordinance. That's all.
I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah. Eric, how do we, it's a good question, right? And how do we address that? Because I think they're dueling concerns. One's aesthetic and one is, are you going to get insurance or not?
Yeah, it's hard to say at this point without looking at each lot individually. My guess is it's probably going to be okay. We can add some wording to the extent or to the effect of, as long as it doesn't conflict with any other, portion of the municipal code or something like that. Yeah,
Sorry, not to exceed 5%.
we'll have to craft it.
Yeah, you can't put that because then it defeats the purpose of having the 5-foot barrier.
The 5-foot barrier, as I understand it, is non-negotiable for insurance companies. So I think what I would look for language around here is if that leads to exceeding the percent that could be hardscaped for that lot, that requirement would be waived, I guess, for that lot, because it's a lot by lot decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the simplest? I mean, we have time because this isn't we have a final landscape plan, right, to come up with it. But I understand what you want some certainty around it.
Yeah, and what I'm curious about is if the intent is to make sure that these properties could be insured, and I'm with you on that.
Yes.
Is that maybe the condition has that intent written into it. In other words, because I'm not aware of that maybe it's a question for existing homes, but we've been selling a lot of homes that don't have that over, up until yesterday. And I haven't heard that that's a problem with getting insurance, but I could be wrong. It could be coming down the pike and I just don't see it yet.
I've been told of one new home that had some issues.
Right, so that's definitely a concern that we would have to address. So I guess my question is, if the condition can be written in such a way that the purpose of which is to make sure the houses could be insured, and if we can insure them without doing that, then I think we would all rather see green plants and grass and park. But if you catch my point.
This is why we don't have it in the interim objective design standards yet,
Yes.
because it came up, and which is why, we wanted to have it addressed outside of the other objective design standards so that we
Yeah.
could have this conversation. We're trying to do it on the fly to make sure. So, Eric and council, how do you suggest handling this? I understand Mr. Best's concerns. I understand what we want. How do we marry the two together?
I just want to make sure we understand what you're proposing. Eric and I were just trying to parse it out. So you're saying that, okay, we want this new condition with the 5 foot of defensible space around the home, but if that conflicts with the city's own requirements for hardscape, then that lot would waive this new condition, this new 5 foot of defensible space
It
condition.
was just a suggestion, right? Because I don't know how to do it on the fly, right? But if I think the hardscape percentage is, I think 50%. I could be wrong on that.
Then I would just phrase it as the final landscape plans shall incorporate a minimum of a 5 foot or a minimum 5 feet of defensible space around the home unless the city's hardscape requirements, would preclude those 5 feet from, we'll have to wordsmith
But
that.
I think
but-
you want to flip that the other way around, because if the goal is to get the homeowner insurance and our rule says, hey, you got to have 15% and then the homeowner can't get insurance, we need to flip it. We need to say, if there's a situation where the 5 foot impedes on the 15%, we'll waive the 15%.
So the city we can't add a condition of approval that would be in conflict with our municipal code.
I mean, the idea of getting the home insured from the get-go is the primary concern, regardless of if it's defensible space or some other
Correct.
issue. So I don't know if we hold it from that regard. I don't know if and move away from specifics, maybe. I don't know how you would validate that as far as having someone come in and bless a property and implying that it could be for sure insured. But
Is
there
there
will be
any,
other concerns, but yeah.
I'm sorry, is there anything that grows that would be defensible, like some kind of a ground cover that's low or that
Yeah.
would be fire retardant just naturally?
I don't know.
I don't know.
So Eric, how do you suggest we continue with this if we want to include it, or if we can't include it because we could be in conflict with our own standards? How do we?
Yeah, how do we craft the condition? I've been
Yeah.
thinking about that. And just so everybody knows, I pulled up the section of the code. It's 8.36.030, which has to do with property maintenance. And it specifies that at least 50%, 50, of front yard areas and then side yard areas on corner lots shall be landscaped in some manner. But I also agree with council, you can't just say, well, we're going to basically ignore or waive this section of the code in order to achieve that 5 foot of defensible space. So it's a real kind of push and pull situation.
I think you could also add an if feasible to this condition, and then the applicant could do it on a per lot basis, and if it's feasible and, in compliance with the rest of the code.
Okay. And by the time the final landscape plan is, we'll have time to work through this you'll have time to work through this with staff.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. If we just add, if feasible, everyone comfortable with that? I don't know that we have a lot of other options. Okay, all right, that's fine. Adding anything else? Okay, then I'll look for a motion.
Let's see, we'll start with okey-dokey. So the MND is actually 28, is that correct? 24-028?
Correct.
So I make a motion to adopt resolution number 24-028 to recommend the city council adopt a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting plan for Orchard Grove North as further detailed in the staff report.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Through the chair, just real quick before the next motion, the way the conditions are written, the implication is that these will all be verified by staff. I just want to make sure the commission is comfortable with that, or if, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
We just saw what happened when we tried to write it.
Okay. I make a motion to adopt resolution number 24-029 to recommend the city council approve a vesting tentative subdivision map VTSM 9649 as further detailed in the staff report with the 2 additional conditions of approval as shown on our screen with the, after they're subjected to a, what did you say, a review?
But I was just going to say that staff will incorporate these into the final resolution that gets signed.
Okay, and the staff will incorporate them.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes. We have one more.
All right. I make a motion to adopt resolution number 24-030 with to recommend the city council approve a design review DR 23-012 with the additional conditions of approval as shown on our screen to be incorporated by staff as further detailed in the staff report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Okay. Moving on to our second business item, F1. An amendment to design review number 17-002 to allow modifications to the home designs for the Meadows project, formerly Cowell Ranch, generally located east of Vineyards Parkway and south of Marsh Creek Road. Staff report will be delivered by Jennifer Hagan.
Thank you, Vice Chair and members of the Commission. The application before you tonight is a design review amendment, DR 17-002-3A, to replace the previously approved duet architecture plans for 140 active adult project known as the Meadows, and also formerly known as Cowell Ranch. The project is generally located east of Vineyards Parkway and south of Marsh Creek, surrounded entirely by state lands. The project site has a long permitting history with a tentative subdivision and design review approvals for the site that were approved in 2018. The approvals were extended on 2 occasions, with the first at the height of the pandemic and also extended through August 2024. In March of this year, the applicant was issued grading and improvement permits and alterations of the land commenced, which fully vested the tentative subdivision map and the design review approvals. The application tonight is to consider a request for an amendment to the design review application to replace the previously approved duet architecture plans with new duet residential home models, including 4 floor plans with 2 duet combinations on the 140 active adult duet units. No changes to the map or the site layout are proposed as part of this application. The proposal includes 4 floor plans with 2 duet combinations, and all proposed floor plans are single story. The homes will range in size from 1,633 square feet to 1,774 square feet, and all include a 2-car garage with 2 parking stalls in the driveway and covered outdoor patio areas. The elevations proposed are Napa Ranch, Vineyard Cottage, and Farmhouse, and the materials, massing, roof shapes, and pitches, as well as colors vary by each of these elevation styles. The color schemes are chosen to further differentiate the styles. Each style has 3 different color schemes that represent traditional color choices for that style, for a total of 9 color schemes. Preliminary typical front yard landscaping was included as part of the submittal. A standard condition of approval requires the submittal of a detailed landscape and irrigation plan for review and approval prior to issuance of building permits. That is also in compliance with the state California Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance. Overall, staff has reviewed the submitted application and believes that it is consistent with the zoning for the property. It provides architecture that is uniquely designed, allowing for increased variation of building design and massing throughout the subdivision. And with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the attached resolution 24-027, approving the amendment for design review 17-002-3A to allow for the modifications of the homes as conditioned. And then that concludes staff's report. Staff is available for questions as well as the applicant.
Thank you, Jennifer. Does the Planning Commission have any clarifying questions? Commissioner Floor?
Sure. I was looking through the staff report, didn't really say why everything was being redesigned. And I was curious about that, or I'm not sure if I'm allowed to consider that, but
So the applicant, I'm sure could speak more to it, but my understanding is the application was originally approved in 2018 based on market trends and conditions, as well as observations for similar projects there at Barcelona and Vineyards. The applicant has indicated that the trends are more towards single-story than two-story, since it is an active adult community, as well as preferences in architectural styles have slightly changed over the last 6 years. So they are coming forward with a more modern architecture that represents the clientele that they are looking to market these to.
that makes sense, that's single story. And we were looking, I was looking at the map that said that certain lots wouldn't fit certain styles. And that doesn't really have to do, does it, with the purpose for making the changes? It's just there to say these particular lots wouldn't have these particular styles, because it doesn't look like the map that I was looking at didn't necessarily, like these other maps we were looking at, says each plan goes here, and we don't have that in front of us tonight.
That's correct. Since these were all single story and duet plans, what this particular project included is where they couldn't go. And basically it's based on the size and conforming location of the lot. Some of the plans wouldn't meet the minimum setback requirements on those. So in order to ensure that all the setbacks still meet the code requirements, those ones would not be allowed on those particular lots.
Those are my questions. Thanks, Jennifer.
Any other clarifying questions? Commissioner Johnson?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So more clarifying questions. So at this time, we'll open public comment. At this time, public is permitted to address the Planning Commission. Remarks are limited to 5 minutes per person, except for the applicant, who will have 10 minutes. Does the applicant wish to address?
And I apologize for monopolizing your meeting tonight, but be that as may. Ms. Hagan described very well why we're looking for a change of the architecture. The original architecture was dated. And, oh, by the way, this project has been pending for several years, but we are going to build it. In fact, we're already building it. The infrastructure work is already underway, so you don't have to see us again for another design review amendment. But yeah, we think the architecture is much better. In fact, all the original architectural styles only had 2 bedrooms. We were actually able to introduce a home that has 3 bedrooms in relatively the same footprint. So we're pretty excited about that. We think that's going to market well for this particular age group, because this is a 55 and over community. And then, yeah, of course, the original architecture had some floor plans with a second story, and that second story was really just a loft. So it didn't have any bedrooms or anything upstairs. It was just, extra use space. And, we found that was not very marketable when we'd done it in the past in other projects for this age group. So we were trying to eliminate that. So we hope you like the architecture better than the original, and thank you for hearing us.
Do we want to go to open public comment before we ask any questions of the applicant, like we did last time? Yep. Okay. April.
Through the chair, we have one speaker, Danny Dorman.
Gentlemen, first off, I want to apologize. I know I was pretty animated back there, and I didn't mean to disrupt you folks. This is one of those times where I really wish I had called in. What I'm going to mention here is probably going to work its way back to the mistakes, mishandling, and misinformation given to you from the last one. Well, first off, I guess old people don't like parks because I don't see one on here. I looked and looked and looked. I see parcels, and if that's a park, that's a park. But I don't see any parks. Now, maybe I'm the unique 65-year-old, but I'd love to have a park if I was living in a community like this. But then again, maybe our Parks and Rec people figured out a way to give us in lieu fees to build a stadium that we already have money set aside for. So, in lieu fees and parks. Well, like I said, maybe I'm the only 65-year-old guy that if I was living in a community like this, I'd love to have a park. I live next to King Park. And if you guys know King Park, that is a huge neighborhood park. I love it. My grandchild and I go out there and play all the time in the grass. We kick balls, we throw stuff, we roll around. I don't know if it would make a difference if it was 2 acres or 0.3. But boy, just to have grass would have been nice. And I'm not quite sure if a traffic study is needed here, since old people really hardly ever drive. You really don't have to worry about traffic congestion here. Yeah, I guess not. Not like the mistakes that were made with the other and percentages that somehow couldn't be answered. 15% of 100 is 15. You add 10 more people in there, it's no longer 15. But that's just me. And yes, I have the full faith and trust of our traffic engineer who was talking to these guys back here, asking for information while you guys were talking. So yeah, I have the full faith and trust of that guy who I have no idea about this one. It looks like the streets might be more spacious, which is good because, old people need more space. But well, I hope they build fence. Oh, actually, Mr. Sparling, ask about a fence here because Kindred and Balfour, which is also a senior community, does not build neighbor fences. They don't put fences at all. That's why, Commissioner Johnson, that's my personal grief with Shay, because they hide all this stuff underneath or they don't tell you at all. So, unfortunately, someone asked me once, who's worse, Shay or Sino? And I said Shay, because at least Sino, you know what you get. Back to this place. As I said, it'd be nice to find out, are there going to be any amenities? Oh, and one more thing, Commissioner Sparling, this happened at Kindred and Balfour. The Senior Citizen Center, it took 2 years to build a mailbox. And the reason they didn't do it was because they didn't have 50% occupancy. 2 years. I had to go get my mother-in-law's mail for 2 years. So somewhere in there, at the very least, for the seniors that really can't get around, to make sure that mailboxes are going to be put even if there's like 5 people living there. Don't make them go all the way to the mailbox or the post office time after time after time to get their mail. Thank you.
At this time, I have no other speaker cards and no hands raised in Zoom.
Thank you. Did we have any questions for the applicant?
I do.
Commissioner Johnson?
So, well, this is a good question for the applicant real quick. Maybe this is a clarifying question. For right now, are we only discussing the change in the designs for the duet, or do we, or some of these other issues that were brought? We're just talking about the change in the designs for the duets?
Yes, that is correct. As part of this application, we are only discussing the architecture and the home plans. But for clarification purposes, this project includes almost 5 acres of parkland and has extensive park and open space areas as part of this application. That was part of the vesting tentative map, which is not under discussion tonight, and so was not included in detail in the staff report.
Okay.
But there are extensive areas as part.
So is that like parcel F and C and
F,
K?
G, and E are all open space areas.
Okay. And then can I just ask about this mailbox issue? Is that something I can ask about, or how's that go?
I'll look to.
Yeah, you can ask.
Okay.
I mean, we don't really have a great response to the mailbox issue. Maybe the applicant does.
I'm just curious.
I wanted to point one other thing out to just piggyback on what Jennifer said. This is also a private development, so these open space areas are for use by the residents only. So it's a little different scenario than the prior project, which, where the commission said, hey, we really want to park here. That would have been a public park. There's no space for a public park in this location.
We say private as a gated community?
Correct.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because mailboxes are sometimes the bane of our existence as a developer, because the post office likes to not deliver until they're ready to deliver, even if we have boxes in place. But our plans for this community are likely that we're going to have a centralized mail kiosk where all of the mailboxes are, and it's going to be over by the rec facility, which is going to have a clubhouse and a pool and a hot tub and all that. And so that's the intent, and we will put that up right up at the beginning.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Sorry, Mr. Best, if you can come up.
I love the opportunity to speak, so.
Yeah. So the fence question, right? I know this is maybe not technically part of the design review, but how are you going to handle the fences for this development?
Yeah, so it's going to be a little varied. A lot of the homes, if you see the land plan, a good portion of them face the state parkland. And so our intent there is that the rear yard fences are going to be a short masonry wall and then a view fence. And then on the other side of that, you're going to like this, for defensible space, there's a pathway that's 10 feet wide, I think, that goes around the entire perimeter of the project. And so it'll be, fence, walkway, property line, walkway, trail, and then a fence to the backyards. There will be some locations where we're going to put masonry walls up on the sides of the lots, because there are pass-throughs and open spaces. So anywhere there's a activity space, we're going to put a wall up to create that privacy. So it's a fairly varied fencing plan, and that's going to come through staff for approval when we get all that drawn up, which is happening now.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I guess since we're on the topic, I just want to point out, it looks to me like you've got large lawns strategically placed under the power lines that run all through the neighborhood at a certain angle. You've got 6 pickleball courts, a swimming pool, a spa, a big lawn, and a community center. as an amenity. You've got this dry creek bed, and you said there's trails all the way around it. And so just want to commend you because I'm a very big proponent for open space, and I really like the looks of all of that. Wasn't really a question, just a compliment.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? We can close public comment. Okay. Commission discussion. Commissioner Johnson,
I have nothing at this time.
Commissioner Floor.
Sure. I did like the designs. They do have a lot of dimensionality, and I do very much understand the desire for people at a certain age to be finding a single-story house. I'm kind of going to be in that position myself in not too long. So I think that this is a sensible thing to do, and I just don't really have any problem with it.
Commissioner Brandt.
Yeah, I'll echo what Commissioner Flora described. It's becoming increasingly common that 55 communities seem to opt into the single story. You look at all the communities down in sort of southwest Brentwood, and you see a lot of single story homes and a lot of duets. It's very appropriate for this. So I completely understand why the need to move with the times in terms of the design. So I think a lot of them are very applicable to the community. And I think, as Commissioner Flora also described, that looks like a wonderful community in general.
I'll just add that I told Jennifer this. I thought this was, my gut was it was going to be easy. I think these designs are far superior to the ones you had before. I think you said it best, is that the old ones were dated. And that's regardless of whether it was single story or two story. I mean, I prefer the more, this look more than other looks that, are being submitted. This reminds me of a couple developments I've seen in Palm Springs that are new as well. So very similar to that. Maybe they're yours, I don't know, but yeah. So Commission, any other comments? Otherwise, I will look for a motion.
I'll make a motion. I make a motion to adopt resolution number 24-27, approving the design review amendment to DR 17-002-A3 as further detailed in the staff report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. So we will move into informational reports from the committees. Transplant?
Yeah, the last meeting, we had a budget discussion with Tri-Delta Transit. They are experiencing an $800,000 budget shortfall for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. The Transplant Committee approved said $800,000 fulfillment from an appropriate fund. It's more of a general fund that's meant to fund shortfalls of this nature. The majority of the reasons around it as to why their shortfall had mostly to do with a large drop in overall ridership, particularly on some of the bus routes. But this enables funding that continues to enable a lot of folks that struggle with their transportation needs to continue to be met, particularly in areas in East County that are, a bit underprivileged. So all in all, it's pretty good.
Design review?
Design review didn't meet.
And land use, obviously, Chair Roberts is not here. So do we have any future agenda requests? Moving to H1.
I'd like to add a discussion point here.
For a new
agenda item, yeah.
Thank you.
As was brought up in the meeting with regards to the first topic, in terms of identifying a potential policy document in which Brentwood specifically identifies VMT standards. I imagine that this would be something that would be pushed to council as far as an exploration and then documented standard that we find to be applicable. I'd like to at least explore that idea. I know Mr. Kursavan agrees with the current standard that was put together through CCTA, but I think a VMT study specific to Brentwood could also be relatively or very applicable. So,
Commissioners? Comments?
Yeah, do we comment on it at this time, or do we just put it on the agenda for next time?
Well, we have to have,
Oh, I
Yeah,
have no
we would
objection
put
to
it.
it.
Yeah, through the chair, we would put it on a subsequent agenda for full discussion.
yeah, but we have to have 3 votes to add it, correct?
No, you don't,
No,
not
we
at this
don't.
point.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
Commissioner Brand made that known, so we'll put it on
got it,
one of the upcoming agendas, and then you'll have a chance to talk about it as a group.
got it.
Yep.
I'd like to add something, probably stealing our vice chair's idea about the pervious pavement to see if not that we can do this, but at least if it would be studied, or can we recommend that we get can we recommend that there be some kind of guideline set up or asked to look into it, or is that something we can do?
Well, again, so we can bring that back as a future agenda item for full discussion since it's not agendized tonight. One thing I might suggest, and we can talk about this when it's on the agenda, is the possibility if it's a simple enough item, and actually most items these days don't seem to be very simple. But we could potentially just make some sort of a presentation to the commission, like an informational presentation, to potentially, satisfy the curiosity. If that doesn't work and there's some other, work product that's desired, that probably would need to be kicked up to council, because it does affect other existing and future work efforts that staff's involved in. But we'll start with a full discussion, at the next meeting, and then go from there. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that some of these could potentially be handled through just, interaction with staff at a meeting and, to answer questions essentially.
Sounds like a plan.
But we'll take each one separately.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Any other future agenda requests? The defensible space is already in the works for the interim objectives guidelines, so I heard someone mention that. All right, seeing none, we'll move to H2 for a future agenda item request from Commissioner Flohr regarding the possibility of a training session to discuss how the commission can review applications while retaining the most discretion allowed by law. Commissioner Flohr.
Thank you. So I decided not to write another 4-page explanation of what I want, because that didn't seem to go over very well last time. This is pretty simple. We had a training here recently that was pretty good, but it was kind of repetitive with what we get at the Planning Commissioner Academy, and it's oriented more towards, like, what is a vesting tentative map and things like that, what we might see. And what I'm really most interested in, that I don't get a lot of training on, that I would like to see some training on, and it maybe just incorporate it into the next time we do one. If there is a next time, I don't know. But what I would like to know about are things, like I was asking council today on a prior item, where we have discretion to depart from the recommendation that's put in front of us. So that, as an example, apparently we cannot recommend that a park be placed in place of the in lieu fee because of the way that that's worded. And so it's more about understanding the code, the municipal code, the general plan, in terms of what is mandatory for us to do and where do we have discretion what can we do to change a recommendation what could we be looking for? And also maybe some ideas about what planning, so we understand what planning looks for when they consider approving an application, so that we can double check that. We can go through and we want to do a thorough job as planning commissioners. We don't want to just, or at least I don't want to just accept the staff report, take the recommendation, and just do that. We want to make sure that we give everything that comes in front of us a thorough review. And I think we owe that to the public. And so I don't know if I'm phrasing it clearly enough. I just want to know where we have discretion, where we don't have discretion, what we can do, what we can't, when we have an application in front of us, and related to each of the kind of documents that we'll get, a tentative map or a design review or a CUP. These things are things that I think would be truly unique, having been through some of the training and having witnessed many of these meetings through the years. I think that this kind of information would be extremely valuable to a planning commission, and allow us to really get in and roll up our sleeves and work for the community in a way that would be meaningful, and it would also just inform the process for us a little better. So that I'm sorry, I was kind of addressing that to staff, but it's for the planning commission to consider. But I guess we would have to have some public comment before we, or unless you, I guess you can ask me questions, because I'm kind of questions of staff, or is it just public comment and that's it?
It's public comment.
Okay.
So at this time, the public is permitted to address the planning commission. Remarks are limited to 5 minutes per person. April?
Through the chair, we have no speaker cards for those present in the chambers, and I have no hands raised in Zoom.
We'll close public comment. Discussion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. I like the idea, anytime we have more tools available to us as a commission, as I think all of us have seen, at least in the last, in our individual tenures on this committee, our commission, excuse me. It's a sea of gray. We're looking to turn very small levers here and there as opposed to giant ones. And I think anything that enables us to make much more surgical decisions, I think enables this commission to make smarter choices for Brentwood.
Commissioner Johnson?
So you're suggesting having another training session with a different focus?
Sure. Either, maybe a separate session, or just in lieu of the session that we had last time, like next year, if there's another session, that it would include this kind of content. The extent of that is something that staff could work out, but this is the kind of thing that I think that we need training on. So yeah, I guess I should be thinking about some kind of a motion. Should I be thinking about a motion?
Well, I think we also need to understand or I need to understand a little bit more about kind of the output, the intent, right? So if what you're trying to get out of it is, and this is a question, I may not be wording it in this phrase of a question, is the intent to better understand, as Commissioner Brand stated, what levers we can pull to make changes, whether it's for or against what staff recommends, whether it's to approve or to reject a project, or to change certain conditions within the project. Is that the end goal? And I thought when you brought this up, we didn't have a discussion, but you had mentioned, or I had maybe jumped in at that once you were done and said, did we want to have this as a workshop so the public could also ask questions?
I'm open to the idea of a workshop. I was just looking for the content, the format. I'm pretty open to. The question, but going back to the first part of your question, yeah, I think Commissioner Brand said it very well, that what levers do we have available to us to pull? And by the way, I mean no disrespect to staff in saying that we might want to vary from the recommendation from time to time. I just think that that's part of the job. You know, like we would just be looking at it to see if there was something that we thought was desirable to change and how we could do that without the work that we get in front of us is always stellar. So I have no problem with the quality of the staff reports, the recommendations. I just want to know, as a planning commissioner, you know, how I can additionally help the community. So yeah, levers. I guess I just want to, is this, before I make a motion, I just want to know if Erica, do you think this is something that you could do? I mean, is it? I'm asking you to write a course, maybe, because I think it doesn't exist. So, and I know firsthand it's a lot of work to write a course. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a really broad topic, and I certainly understand the importance of it to, you know, you and the rest of the commission. So going back a little bit, staff's intent is to have these annual training sessions to follow up on the academy. So we had the one in May, I guess that was 6 weeks ago now, that followed up on the academy. So the next kind of like big annual training wouldn't be until like the spring of next year. If the commission understands the request and is for it, essentially, I would recommend to make a motion for the council then to consider it, because it would be a fairly significant work effort. And at this point in time, and I just wanted to follow up on something from earlier, we're looking to provide the council with updates on 4 Planning Commission future agenda item requests. So it would be the one you're talking about right now. It would be the Lone Oak, Grant, Adams traffic situation. It would be the notification, expanding the radius from 300 to 1,000. And then also the open space Measure Q issue that Commissioner Flohr had brought up a while ago. So those are all planned to go to the council on the 23rd as separate individual items for them to, you know, discuss and consider. I don't know how quickly we could pull together a separate training session on the topic that you're talking about now ahead of the one in, like, say, the spring. I haven't even really thought about what the work effort would look like, but I think it would be fairly significant. But again, we'll discuss that with the council and then figure out a schedule after they talk about it. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I'm thinking,
it probably, I'm sorry, it probably would be, I'm just thinking here as we're sitting, but it'd probably be something where we'd want to pull somebody in from the outside as well, right? Just to kind of help us out with the other stuff that we're working on. So,
well, if they're consultants, they can sell it to other cities if it's good, right? I've been a consultant. So
There you
yeah, even if it's just a module to be included in that training, because it was a 2-hour session. So if it was even just a module that was, and it can be as broad or as narrow, because I don't know a lot about the topic, so I don't know what to ask for specifically. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to learn more about the topic. So I would, you know, if you wanted to, as a part of the process, talk to the Planning Commission, certainly I'm available to talk about it at any time. And I think maybe some of the other commissioners might be available to talk about it as well. So we could just sit down and say, hey, this is, you know, what we want to know. I mean, I feel like probably it's kind of an odd request for you. I mean, it's something different, it's something new. So, but it's something that I think that would benefit all of us, and maybe even the city council and maybe other cities, to have this understanding really of what it is that a city council or a planning commission can positively do. You know, like we know we can approve the recommendations. We can go through the design review and we can make little changes to the designs. But all these gray areas, if we want to modify the recommendation, that's where it gets really hard. And, oh, I know what resources are available for us to do research. Like, so if the municipal code is governing a lot of these things, what should we be looking at? If design guidelines, how should we be looking at those? And especially since we've modified them to be more objective, what can we and can't we do? Like last year we were talking about whether or not you can't have a chain link fence really means you can't have a chain link fence, which apparently it didn't at that point in time. So things like that. I just want to know what resources are available to us to study on our own when we're looking through an application. What we should spend our time thinking about. What can't we do? Is that starting to?
So here's my thought on this whole topic. I don't think this is ready to go to council for the June 23rd meeting, whatever the date is, in 3 weeks.
July.
I think it's not, July. It's not, I don't think it's, I'm always going to be supportive of a commissioner wanting to have a future agenda item so we can talk about it and then work through that issue. I don't think we know it's defined enough to even make a request, except that I think we have the opportunity between now and, say, October to have this topic come back and give us the opportunity to think about what we would want in the next training. And then that would allow, and this is just a suggestion, that this would allow staff to find a training program for the training that they're going to do a year from now, right? Because they're going to go out and they're going to hire somebody, and then we're not taking staff resource and money to prepare, city council, but also bring in every time I hear the word consultant, I just go, this is the fourth class of government, right?
Watch it.
Ask how much the city spends on every report, every consultant. So, since we're going to do the training anyways, just have what we are looking for that training be better defined of what we want to get out of it, because it doesn't sound like this training would happen until that point anyways, right? So we're March, April anyways, right? So we're 8 months, 9 months away. I think my opinion is, let's bring this item back, so it's on the agenda, we can talk about it, but we also have homework to do where we think, what do we want to get out of the training? And then you can make a list, Commissioner, we all can make a list of what we'd like to get out of the training. That weaponizes the information for Eric, if Eric is the one who finds the consultants, because we love consultants. And then he can go find the right program to get the questions answered, or at least prep the consultants on this is what we want to get out of it, so we can have that discussion with them. Does that meet what you're looking for?
I think that's a great idea that we would bring it back here to give more guidance. And at that time, Eric, you would have had time to confer with staff and think about it, without spending a lot of money, but just think about some ideas. And we would all just have another agenda item just to brainstorm it a little bit. So
Yeah, I think
that's something we can do.
Sorry?
Is that something we're allowed to do? Is that put an item on the agenda for a brainstorming session?
As the sitting consultant, I just would say it would be great, not that I disagree with your idea, but specifically what the outcomes that we want to achieve are. And you mentioned a few of them, which was, you want to know what levers we can push, but maybe be specific in a given area so that they can, target it so that we won't complain and say, well, that's not what we wanted, So
Yeah.
making sure that we could be real specific about the outcomes we want to get so that we don't beat up on Eric saying, hey, that was a useless training session.
So is it clarifying the potential output, right? Because that's somewhat unclear, I think, at this point as far as what that desired training would entail. Therefore, we get the inputs from this commission across the board. So my understanding is it
Yeah,
would
that
come
would be the
back to us.
purpose of that meeting would be to define all those things.
Yes, because I
Exactly
think,
what you're asking for.
right, because I think when I think about, we have different, first of all, we obviously have different professional backgrounds, right? But we have different experience within the planning commission, right? In terms of time spent and also projects, different types of projects seen, right? So, and we have to throw this out there as well, right? So our terms are up in January. I think if we're going to do this, we need to approach this from an idea, from a place of, there could be three, what would a new commissioner need to know? Because there could be 3 new commissioners next year. And, what would make their job easier, right? Because they're gonna I think both of you, your first one was a somewhat controversial item, and you guys got thrown right into it, right? So I think it's valuable, the conversation, and I think if we put it on the agenda for the future, whenever we're having a meeting and the meeting is not a long agenda item, that we have, and we have 4 days to write down our thoughts. Obviously, between now and then, we can do that as well. And we come back, we have a productive discussion, we give Eric great direction, and then we move forward with what we want the training to look like, because based on what we want to get out of it, not so much what consultants want to say.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's excellent.
I said the outcome. And I'll also just say one other thing, limit it to maybe 5 topics. We don't need 10, because if you get to 10 and 15 topics, it'll be like spaghetti. And so.
Yeah, you can stack rank them and see what time limit is on and how complicated those topics are, right?
So can I just follow up with a few things here? One is, and I think this is it's good discussion, right? Because it's basically prepping for the next kind of big annual training session. And staff never intended for these annual training sessions to simply recycle themselves from year to year, right? Even though there could be turnover amongst the commissioners. So we do want to kind of tailor them each year to certain topics, right? So this is, I think, great in terms of getting set up for that next session. I'd be fine with the commissioners reaching out to me directly over the next, several weeks, couple months with your ideas. I can then kind of cobble those together and bring an item back for open discussion, right, with the commission and the public, of course, and then the commission can kind of whittle it down from there.
So we would email you directly, not copying anybody else.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want a Brown violation like a city close by.
Yeah, I mean, you can call me, you can stop by, email, whatever.
Okay.
So yeah,
I think
so
that
we
would
do
work
that.
well, and that way you don't have to. This item would just be kind of tabled. You wouldn't have to make any sort of motion on it tonight. But we will follow up at a future meeting once I have all the information from you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sure, I like that idea a lot.
Okay.
Okay.
One thing before, and I know we're looking for an adjournment, but I just want to follow up real quick. When the reporting was done for the committees, Vice Chair Sparling, you noted that Chair Roberts was absent tonight. There was a Land Use and Development Committee meeting back on June 17th, a couple weeks ago. So just a real quick update. The committee considered potential updates to the zoning regulations for gas stations, car washes, and alcohol sales. That's all part of this focused zoning ordinance update that staff is working on. So that's progressing, and we'll get a next bite of the other items here in a few weeks.
So will Commissioner or Chair Roberts report back on that lead meeting when she's here next, or or you just did that?
Well, I did that for her just because, she's not here tonight. I don't know if she's going to be at the next one or not, and if she's not, I'll report out on that one as well.
Okay. All right. Okay. The next Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for July 16th, 2024 at 7 PM and will be held here at council chambers located at 150 City Parkway. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Really well, okay.
Yeah, well, I'm not driving, I gotta get somebody. to pick
Nice
me
job, man.
You want to leave first so I can?
All right, have a great night. Thank you. Take care.
What is this?